Hey there, welcome to Brad Arrows. Tonight, we've got hours of chilling horror stories combined with soothing rain sounds to help you relax and sleep. Before you drift off, leave a comment below and let us know where you're listening from and what time it is. If these stories give you chills, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Get cozy and let the fear take over. The trial. What the hell is this place? Where am I? The words echoed in my mind as consciousness slowly returned. A man's voice broke through the silence to my left. Finally awake, big guy. I've been sitting here in the dark for about 30 minutes. You sleep like the dead, said another guy wearing a red baseball cap. He sat chained to a metal pipe, just like all the other participants in this strange gathering. Have we been kidnapped? A blonde girl tried to free herself from her restraints, yanking at her arm, but another woman stopped her. A brunette, about 25 years old, grabbed her wrist. Stop panicking. You'll only hurt yourself and won't get anywhere. After her words, the anxious girl seemed to calm down and fell silent. Yeah, seriously, quit the chatter. It's depressing enough as it is. Look at those two over there, they got dragged here, chained up like dogs, and they're not even fazed. Probably not their first rodeo with this kind of experiment. The guy in the cap pointed at me, and another girl sitting to my right. We were the only ones who hadn't spoken a word since the lights came on, apparently still in shock. Here's what I need to clarify. The group of complete strangers I found myself with was trapped in a sealed room, roughly 16 by 16 feet. There were 6 of us total, 3 women and 3 men. We were chained to a large iron pipe that ran along the entire perimeter of the room and reached up to the ceiling. This appeared to be some kind of abandoned basement or research facility, with crumbling walls, broken tiles on the floor, and a single metal door. Just below the ceiling, an old fluorescent light flickered intermittently, casting dim yellow light that allowed us to barely see our surroundings. Someone had definitely kidnapped us, and whoever it was had to be a professional. None of us remembered how we got here, and even basic memories like our names, where we lived, or our hobbies were gone. It was as if all the kidnapped victims had been injected with some memory-wiping serum. But why? Listen, does anyone remember how they got here? I mean, what were you doing before you were dragged to this place? The muscular man with tattoos on his arms broke the brief silence, and everyone looked at him. I personally don't remember jack, not what I was doing, not even my name. What about you? The guy in the cap turned to the 2 girls, the blonde and brunette. They both shook their heads almost in unison. But the quiet, auburn-haired girl sitting next to me suddenly came to life. I saw a bright light shining in my eyes, like a flash, and then darkness. That's all I remember. After finishing, the girl looked at me for some reason, and that's when I got my first good look at her face. Long eyelashes, green eyes, full lips. I'll admit, she was beautiful. However, the current situation wasn't exactly conducive to introductions, so I simply looked away. Well, she can talk after all. What a surprise. And you're apparently our local comedian, having too much fun for someone who's been kidnapped, don't you think? I said, unable to tolerate the obnoxious behavior of this joker. Oh, now Romeo speaks up. You two aren't a couple by any chance. You seem to match each other. Guys, stop the pointless banter. We need to figure out how to get out of here. Try to free your hands. The man couldn't finish his sentence, as a nasty creaking sound came from somewhere in the ceiling. It was an inconspicuous speaker, located in the upper corner of the room. Soon, a terrifying voice began broadcasting through it, instantly silencing everyone. "Greetings, dear guests. You're probably thinking you ended up here by accident, but believe me, that's not the case. It wasn't chance that brought you here. You'll remember exactly what it was a bit later. I can tell you that not everyone is capable of escaping from here. Much will depend on yourselves. I wish you to pass all the trials with dignity. Good luck." As soon as the stranger's voice fell silent, the iron door that had been bothering me all this time suddenly opened, revealing a long corridor. It was lit by the same buzzing lamps, and iron pipes ran along the walls, as if someone had hastily copied our room and stretched it out for several dozen yards. We didn't sit in silence for long. The local joker soon spoke again, though I have to admit, this time he was talking sense. Clever how he set this up. Opens the door, but who's going to untie our hands? Are we supposed to gnaw through the chains with our teeth? The guy was slightly stunned when he demonstratively stretched his arms forward and saw how the shackles slipped off his wrists and fell to the floor with a clang. This despite the fact that just moments ago, they could barely be moved. After a few seconds, the rest of us repeated the same trick, and all 6 of us, including me, got to our feet and approached the exit. So what, they're just going to let us go like that? What's the point? The blonde girl asked with bewilderment in her voice, looking toward the end of the corridor. No, nothing is ever that simple. You heard what he said, we're facing some kind of trials. This psycho has set traps here and wants us to go through them. After the man said this, everyone looked at him. This guy had quite an eccentric appearance, long black hair, a thick beard, muscular, and tattoo-covered physique. He wore a black t-shirt under a leather vest, just like bikers wear, and classic wide jeans with worn boots. I can't say he was the leader of our group, but as soon as the door opened, the man stepped forward slightly and blocked everyone else with his powerful back. All right, here's how we'll do this. I'll go first and watch out for any traps that might catch us off guard. You guys figure out who goes after whom. We move as a group and cover each other. That way we'll have a better chance of not getting picked off one by one. Oh hell no, count me out. I'd rather stay in this room, at least it's. The guy in the cap didn't finish, because at that exact moment, the lights in the room where we'd been staying suddenly went out. It was like a signal that no one would be able to just sit it out in the warm little room, and would have to sacrifice something, in this case, their safety. The crafty guy in the checkered shirt and earring, who clearly wasn't particularly brave, immediately understood this. Honestly, he looked more like some rich kid who liked spending his daddy's money and spent all his free time either at the gym or nightclub. He clearly didn't like the idea of staying alone in the dark room. So the guy took a few steps forward, hinting that he agreed to go with the rest of us. There we go, I knew you'd come to your senses. All right guys, let's go. Let's not waste a minute. Moving slowly and uncertainly through the dim corridors, we periodically stopped and listened to the surrounding sounds. However, apart from the humming lamps, nothing else could be heard in those eerie tunnels. It was as if we'd been dragged into some kind of bunker where everything was identical. Even the same combination of numbers periodically appeared on the walls. 1847. Maybe it was a secret code or marked the time of some important event. I didn't know then, and I wasn't really in the mood for puzzles when there was so much tension around us. It felt like we were walking through a minefield. All the group members were examining literally every yard to avoid stumbling into some trap. We continued moving quietly through the underground labyrinth until we suddenly encountered something inexplicable. When we reached a T-junction, the man who'd been walking ahead suddenly stopped and looked to the left with alarm. I followed his example along with the others, and moments later, we saw a short human silhouette standing in the darkness of the corridor. Right where the stranger was located, the lamps weren't working for some reason, but about 65 feet behind him, the lighting was fine. Thanks to this anomaly, the outline of the suspicious figure was quite clear. "Hey you, come out of the shadows and identify yourself." The bearded guy was the first to break the tense silence and took a couple of steps forward, showing he wasn't afraid of anyone. However, the mysterious silhouette also wasn't about to back down, and as soon as the big man challenged him, the unknown figure mirrored his opponent's movement, taking several steps forward. The figure stopped and continued to stare at us silently. At that moment, I noticed something strange. The lamp closest to him, which had been flickering but still working, suddenly went out. It was as if someone could control the electricity or something like that. Or maybe he just didn't want to show his appearance, waiting for the right moment to do so. The answer didn't take long. As soon as the stranger came a little closer, the big guy couldn't stand it and moved toward him, probably planning to start a fight. But then something unexpected happened. Right after the man entered the darkness, he suddenly stopped abruptly and seemed to jerk slightly. Then there was a brief lull. It lasted only a few seconds before the real nightmare began. In an instant, our leader slowly turned around and took several steps back, emerging into the light again. His stomach was pierced through by some strange tentacles that were writhing in different directions. Blood poured from the man's mouth, but despite this, he tried to tell us something, though personally I heard only the wheezing of a dying person. Then we saw the creature that had been hiding in the shadows all this time, now coming into the light and approaching its victim closely. This wasn't human at all, but rather a half-decomposed corpse, only somehow wrong with the aforementioned tentacles and an extra pair of human arms sticking out from behind its back. I also noticed that its body was missing skin. The thing seemed to be turned inside out. It definitely couldn't be a living creature, but I didn't believe in aliens or demons either. What the hell was this thing? This question haunted me the entire time our group of 5 people stood in that corridor, watching this horrible process in shock. The most terrible thing happened when one of the tentacles suddenly pierced the guy's skull and came out of his face. After that, all the lamps in our sector went out completely. The girls couldn't take it anymore and screamed in chorus with fear. Then we all ran together in the opposite direction, toward where there was still light. As if waiting for this, the creature rushed after us in pursuit, as if trying to drive us somewhere, and ultimately it succeeded. Running around another corner, we saw an iron door at the end of the corridor with a green sign hanging on it that read "Exit," which looked slightly ironic in this situation. Obviously, no one would let us go that easily, but there were simply no other options. We could hear approaching footsteps behind us and the sounds of lamps shutting off, so there was only one way forward. The guy in the cap was the first to reach the door. Without hesitation, he pulled the handle and flew into the dark room. All the others, including me, burst in after him. I was running last, so I had the hardest job, somehow managing to find the door in the darkness and lock ourselves away from that bloodthirsty monster. It had easily dealt with a 200-pound man, so finishing us off would be child's play for it. But surprisingly, everything went too smoothly. The door seemed to close and lock by itself, and no one even tried to break it down. It was an ordinary trap. I realized this immediately after taking a few steps to the side and feeling the ground disappear from under my feet. Then my body tumbled down, following the others. We fell into some kind of pit, very dark and cold. It sucked all the positive energy out of us, leaving only despair and fear. Fear of something unknown that lurked in the darkness of this terrible place. As soon as I got to my feet and looked around, I saw a lamp similar to a kerosene one a few yards away. Only instead of fire, there was a bright white orb inside it. It stood on a neatly carved square stone. This was the only light source, but it clearly wasn't enough to illuminate the entire room. "Hey, is anyone alive? Help me, I think I twisted my ankle," one of the girls pleaded. The voice came from somewhere in the darkness, so it was hard to tell who was speaking. "I'm alive, damn it. Hit my tailbone so hard it's killing me. Where are you? Come on, I'll help." The guy approached one of the girls, apparently the blonde, and took her arm. She struggled to her feet, and together they hobbled over to me. Soon 2 more silhouettes emerged from the darkness. The brunette came out first, followed by the green-eyed girl. "Tell me I'm dreaming, please. What is this place, and why did we end up here?" "No, this isn't a dream," I said without taking my eyes off the lantern light, as if mesmerized. "Everything's too realistic. It's more like some kind of test." A test for what?" "How soon we'll croak. Did you see that thing and how it shredded that man? We were just caught and thrown as food to some monsters. We're fresh meat to them, that's all." "Oh, come on, don't be so primitive. Didn't you notice anything strange? Why did that creature stand still and not attack us? Why couldn't it catch anyone even though we were running like snails? I'm more than sure that if that big guy hadn't attacked it, he'd be alive now and standing next to us. Damn, guys, you sure picked a time to argue. Let's get out of here first, then you can figure out who's right and who's wrong." The feisty brunette stepped forward and headed toward the lantern. The rest followed her, since standing alone in the darkness was hardly appealing. I don't remember exactly how our new trial began, but as soon as one of the girls picked up the lamp, a dry, crackling sound came from somewhere in the darkness, similar to the crunching of bones. At first I thought I was imagining it, but very soon the sound repeated, only much closer. Whoever it was, they were approaching, and so rapidly that my breath caught. At some point, I couldn't stand it, and snatching the lantern, directed it toward where the sounds were coming from. My heart nearly sank into my boots. In the dim light, I saw a thin person who was creeping toward us with broken, unnatural movements. After each step, his torso bent horribly, creating that very crunching sound, and his head turned in different directions as if he were sniffing around. The stranger's face was wrapped in dirty bandages, and some rag resembling a hospital gown was visible on his body. He definitely couldn't see anything, but for some reason he was walking straight toward us. That is, until I shined the lamp on him. As soon as the light illuminated this monstrous creature, it immediately stopped and froze in the position we'd caught it in. "Who are you, and what do you want from us?" The blonde girl couldn't contain her emotions and shouted at the pursuer, but no reaction followed. He seemed to decide to pretend to be a statue, hoping they simply wouldn't notice him. Then my instinct told me that approaching this character, or playing hero like our late friend, would be a fatal mistake. So neither I nor the other guy were in any hurry to take action. Meanwhile, the creature stood in place and continued to stand there, silently staring at us with an invisible gaze. We probably could have avoided serious problems if at one point we hadn't heard the exact same dry crackling from somewhere to the right. I automatically turned toward where the sound was coming from and noticed another figure in the darkness rapidly approaching us. The situation was identical. After the light beam fell on this creature, it froze in place. But the other thing we'd noticed first suddenly started moving again, probably because I'd taken the lamp away from it, and it was momentarily in darkness. And it would have been fine if there were only 2 of these devils in the pit. Then they could still be controlled somehow. But soon rustling began coming from the right and left and everywhere possible, as if our group was being surrounded. "Are you freaking kidding me?" I shouted aloud, alternately directing the lantern at one, then another, then a third silhouette. Very soon there were so many of these creatures that I could no longer control them all, and only one option remained. Run. We rushed randomly toward where no sounds could be heard, and this turned out to be the right decision. There was a corridor leading somewhere upward, but we had one problem. The girl who'd twisted her ankle couldn't move on her own. The guy in the cap had been dragging her along all this time, and then he simply picked her up so as not to fall behind the others. But then fate intervened. The fact was that there was absolute darkness all around, and the lamp's brightness wasn't even enough to light the way. No wonder that at some point the kid didn't notice a boulder under his feet, and stumbling, crashed to the ground along with the blonde. They were running at the very back, so I didn't immediately understand what had happened, and when I turned around again, it was too late. The guy managed to get up and crawl to the side a bit, but the girl was much less fortunate. She was literally dragged into the crowd within seconds, after which her scream was abruptly cut off. In the narrow corridor, it was much easier to stop this evil, since they were all coming from one direction. Grabbing the guy by the scruff of the neck, I pushed him toward the others and continued to slowly back away, acting as a shield for our entire group. The guys moved almost by feel, but nevertheless soon managed to reach an old elevator in a mesh shaft with sliding gates instead of doors. Light was burning inside it, so my personal presence with the lantern was unnecessary. I couldn't see what was happening with them because all my attention was focused on the monsters. They stood as if enchanted, staring at me, waiting for when I would release this damn lamp. Damn, how does this thing open? I heard someone's female voice behind me. Move aside, let me try. The guy tried to ram through the gates, but unsuccessfully. There was a mechanical combination lock on them that couldn't be broken by hand. What's going on there? This damn elevator is locked. There's a lock here. A lock needs some kind of key. No, it's digital. 10 buttons from 0 to 9. Any ideas? Damn, we're screwed. We don't even remember our own names, but here we need some kind of codes. That's what I'm talking about. Maybe it's some memorable date or something like that. Although the range here is so wide that it's easier to find a needle in a haystack. Wait, I think I know. Up there, almost at every turn, there was a number written, like 1847. Maybe it's some kind of password. Damn, you're observant. Well, let's try it. Saying this, the kid bent down to the lock and began entering the code. Everyone was overjoyed, thinking we could finally escape from this cursed dungeon. But it wasn't that simple. Actually, I take my words back. Doesn't work. Damn, I don't remember the last two digits well. Try 1846. And here I noticed something strange. After we entered the wrong combination, the lantern in my hands suddenly flickered and then began to shine a bit dimmer, as if it were some kind of punishment for the wrong attempt. After the second error, I got pretty tense. If before the bandaged creatures had stood in place and didn't even think of moving, now their behavior changed. They began to stir, turning their heads and moving their fingers as if they were gradually defrosting. Try again, please. Strain yourself and remember these damn numbers. Think, what was there? Let's try 47. After my words, the lamp went out for a second. That was enough for the front rows of mutants to come to life and rush in my direction. Fortunately, the light returned after a brief delay and stopped the frenzied crowd. I had no more chances for error. I remembered 1847. Yes, exactly 1847. And finally came the moment everyone had been waiting for so long. As soon as we entered the correct code, the lock immediately opened, the elevator doors swung open, and we successfully entered the cabin. The creatures that had been tormenting us all this time simply turned back and disappeared into the darkness, as if they had never existed. Another trial had come to an end, but there was still one more ahead. Perhaps the most difficult, because it exposed our essence, showed who could remain human even in the most critical situation, and who was ready to take someone else's life to save their own skin. Inside the elevator, we pressed the only button that was on the panel, after which the cabin started moving and slowly crawled upward. I already had a bad feeling then, but I tried my best to hide my nervousness so as not to look weak in the eyes of the others. Listen, I think I remembered what my name is. I'm Tyler Morrison, born in '97. The guy finally took off his red cap, which he hadn't touched once since I first saw him in the room. Yeah, I remembered too. My name's Alina, but I'd rather not say my age. Let it remain a secret. The auburn-haired girl smiled for the first time since we'd come to our senses in this strange place. I'm Diana, nice to meet you. And you are? The brunette turned to me, lightly touching my shoulder, and at that moment a scene suddenly flashed in my head, a familiar female voice calling my name. Actually, not calling, but screaming. I was driving a car. Light rain was drizzling outside the window. And then a bright flash, and then the memory broke off. Marcus, my name's Marcus. Marcus, why are you so gloomy? Remember that you owe someone money. No, just some strange episode flashed before my eyes. I was like driving a car or something. Forget it, probably just some random life incident. Yeah, don't rack your brain. When we get out of this hole, everything will become clear. We're like family now. Too bad Blondie didn't make it out. She was a pretty girl. After Tyler's words, there was a pause. We rode in silence, remembering what we'd had to go through to get here. Why all this had been devised. Why we were subjected to danger. What we'd done to deserve such torment. While I was pondering this, the elevator had already risen to a floor where there was only one room. It resembled a bathroom in an abandoned psychiatric hospital. Walls lined with white tiles, urinals, sinks with mirrors. It seemed like no one had looked into this place for a long time. There was mold here. It smelled of dampness. But what impressed me most were the toilets with sinks and a bathtub that stood lonely in the far corner. They were heavily stained with rust and something else, as if we'd ended up in some horror movie. When we entered the room, the elevator doors closed by themselves, and it rolled away somewhere down again. From the same crack in the ceiling came the already familiar sound of the loudspeaker. Congratulations, you've reached the final stage. I want to warn you, the next trial will be slightly unfair. Of all those present, I can only release 2. Who it will be is for you to decide. I advise you not to delay, you have only 10 minutes. A small addition, whoever first looks in the left sink will double their chances of salvation. May the strongest win. And then panic seized me. I looked around at the guys standing next to me and saw exactly the same thoughts and emotions on their faces that I had. They didn't want to believe what they'd heard, although subconsciously they understood that they didn't really have much choice. On one of the walls hung a clock. The hands showed 23:09. We had only 10 minutes left to decide who would get out of here alive. Guys, let's not do anything stupid. This is pure provocation. I hope you understand that. My words made those present look away from the clock and look at each other. How do you know? What if he's telling the truth? You saw how easily they commit murders, and all these mutants, they were once people too. And what do you suggest? That we kill each other here? Have you completely lost your mind? Alina decided to support me. Well, why kill? Only 2 can go. The guy looked at me hungrily, seeing not a living person but a competitor. I kept trying to reach this idiot, although mentally I understood that the process was already irreversible. And how did you determine these 2? Yourself and yourself. No, I'll be with him. Diana, the brunette who stood closest to that very sink, entered the conversation. I remembered Tyler. We were riding in a car together. Jessie, the blonde, was with us too. She was my friend. Yeah, I remembered her too. But I don't recall you guys. You weren't dragged here by accident. Here the kid made a sharp lunge and pushed me against the wall, after which Diana, who had been standing a bit apart, ran to the sink and pulled out a silver revolver from it. Alina, meanwhile, couldn't move from her spot the whole time. She was apparently very shocked. Who if not them? Look, they even have matching rings. At that moment, it finally dawned on me. I looked at Alina, then at her right hand. She also glanced at me, and we smiled at each other despite the fact that we'd been at gunpoint for several seconds. This was my wife. It was her voice I'd heard in that memory. We were driving in a car. It was raining outside the window, and then a sudden flash. And then the first shot rang out. I saw blood spray from Alina's temple and stain the white tile on the wall, after which her lifeless body collapsed to the floor. It's hard for me to describe in words all the emotions and sensations I experienced at the moment when a loved one was killed before my eyes. It seemed like I'd just recently remembered her, and then such wild pain in my soul that I wanted to get rid of it as quickly as possible. I didn't have time to turn my head and take one last look into the killer's eyes before the second shot rang out. Now it was aimed at my forehead. I lay on the floor in a pool of my own blood, and no, I wasn't dead. I mean, my brain continued to function, but my body refused to obey me. I seemed to be playing the role of a dead person in some movie, as was my wife. We lay looking at each other. Only I could also see that rotten pair, they couldn't get enough joy from having deceived the system, reached the gun first and eliminated the competition. Yeah, as if, for a moment, I even felt a little sorry for them. As soon as they threw away the revolver and began looking around, waiting for when they'd be rescued. Suddenly light began to seep from the dirty bathtub that had been standing in the corner all this time. Red light as if from hell itself. The entire space around was immediately filled with heart-rending human screams, and bloody tentacles appeared from the edge of the tub, exactly like those the demon in the corridor had. What happened next, I think you can guess. Tyler and Diana didn't even have time to understand what was happening before the tentacles wrapped around their necks and dragged them into the tub within seconds. And then everything was like in a fog. I only remember a white veil appearing before my eyes, and then a flash of light. I woke up in the hospital, all bandaged and broken. On April 15th at 23:19, a serious accident occurred. That night there was light rain. There weren't many cars on the roads. My wife and I were returning home after a late movie when suddenly a gray Ford Mustang came into oncoming traffic. The driver was intoxicated, a young man named Tyler Morrison, born in '97. He died in the hospital without coming out of a coma. He was carrying two girls. 25-year-old Diana Rodriguez, who was sitting in the front passenger seat, also died. Only one blonde girl survived. She was in the back seat and was wearing a seatbelt. My wife and I also somehow managed to survive, although our car was completely crushed. A biker was also injured in this horrific accident. He was riding his Harley behind us and couldn't dodge in time. He was thrown from the road onto the sidewalk, but fortunately, the man was able to recover and came out of the coma even earlier than everyone else. And you know, maybe I would have written it all off to my sick imagination, but I wasn't the only one who witnessed this nightmare. My wife, the biker, his name is Victor, by the way, and Jessica confirmed that they too saw those terrible corridors, the voice over the loudspeaker, and the monstrous creatures that tested us, digging into our souls and looking for flaws they could latch onto. This was a kind of test who really deserved a second chance and who should burn in hell for eternity for their rotten soul. Victor handled this trial faster, essentially sacrificing his life for others, and was rewarded for it. Jessica is a kind soul. She wouldn't hurt a fly. The entity chose her as a victim to see the reaction of the others. Yes, that very pit with the lantern. Tyler, of course, tried to help her, but more out of vanity. He wanted to seem like a hero in the eyes of the group. When they collapsed down there, instead of helping the girl, the kid pushed her away with his feet and crawled toward the saving light. The other guys also failed in this episode. I at least tried to fend off the monsters and look for an exit, but Diana and Alina did absolutely nothing. So there was one more stage, the final one. That's where everything was decided. There's definitely a moral to this story, but let each person find it for themselves. I just want to say that after that accident, I was able to rethink a lot, to believe that something awaits us after death. Maybe it will be the rebirth of the soul, or the classic distribution. Some to heaven, some to hell, but something will definitely happen. You have reached 911. This call is being recorded. 911 operator, what is your emergency? Please send someone, I'm begging you. My address is, okay, I'm going to try to help you. What's your name? Jake. Jake Miller. Jake, I'm dispatching units to you now. They'll be there in about 20 minutes. Tell me what happened. I can't talk loud. It might hear me. I don't understand. Is someone after you? Yes. Are you at home right now? Yes. Is there anyone else in the house besides you? Yes. I understand. Can you describe what this person looks like? Even general details. You won't believe me. We need to know this to put out a description. It's really tall, maybe 7 feet or more, dressed all in black. There's something like a mask on its face with a smiling mouth. This definitely isn't human. What do you mean it's not human? What do you mean by that? Hello? Damn it, please come faster. It's standing in the hallway, trying the door handle, trying to get into my room. Jake, police are on their way. They'll be there any minute. Do you have anything you can defend yourself with? No, I'm hiding in the closet. There's just my clothes in here. Okay, I need you to stay calm. Sit quietly and don't. Oh God, what do you want from me? Leave me alone, it's in the room. It sees me, hello. Jake, are you there? Music, hello. This recording was given to Jake Miller's family after he made a call to emergency services on the night of March 27th to 28th. During the conversation, the young man was very frightened and kept mentioning some person who had been following him for several days. That same night, police managed to break into Jake's apartment, but the owner was no longer there. Where the guy disappeared remains a mystery to this day. He still cannot be found. Soon several theories appeared about where the young man could have vanished. Law enforcement believed he staged his own kidnapping and left in an unknown direction. The door to his apartment was locked from the inside. No one had broken the locks. Neighbors heard nothing suspicious. Police probably would have stopped at this theory if one day all the messages Jake had sent to relatives and friends shortly before his disappearance were published. In them, the guy told in detail what had been happening to him in recent days and who exactly had been following him. So the first fragment of correspondence dated March 21st, exactly 1 week before that fateful call. Jake wrote to his friend that he had decided to go to Pennsylvania for a few days. He loved traveling to dangerous and mysterious places, engaged in dark tourism, visiting sites known for tragic events. Hey Eli, remember I told you I found a new place for photo shoots? Look what I bought. The guy sent a photo of a plane ticket from Philadelphia to Pittsburgh. The flight was scheduled for March 22nd at 6 in the morning. Oh, you're flying to Pittsburgh. Going to try some Primanti Brothers sandwiches, damn, and look at the steel mills. Do you know anything about Pennsylvania besides stupid stereotypes? Like, they also have good pierogies and Rolling Rock beer. Or am I wrong? Yeah, right, but I'm not flying there for sandwiches. Have you heard anything about the abandoned coal mines? No, is this another place where a bunch of people died? I know you love that stuff, you sick freak. Well, not exactly. These are underground tunnels directly under the mountains of Pennsylvania, with a total length of about 300 miles. Once ancient mining operations were located there, but then due to mine collapses and gas explosions, it was decided to abandon most of the shafts. About 6,000 miners died in various accidents over the decades. Just think about it. A bunch of tunnels filled with endless rows of support beams and rusted equipment. And all this is located right under the Appalachian Mountains. This place is literally an empire of the dead, and I'm flying there tomorrow to see it all with my own eyes. The photos will be simply gorgeous. I remember telling you that you're a complete psycho. Well, here's confirmation of my words. Jake, do you really have nothing better to do than wander around all these cursed places? You understand, this is a completely different level. abandoned bunkers, even Centralia doesn't compare to these mines. For tourists, only about a mile of underground passages is open. Everything else has long been abandoned, and going there is strictly prohibited. Closed sectors are often patrolled by state police, so I found myself a guide on one forum. Cool dude, he'll accompany me throughout the entire journey. Wow, you prepared well. Well, listen, that's cool. Are you sure about him? What if he's some local maniac who'll lead you somewhere wrong and leave you to die? No, Eli, he's a normal guy. He takes people to the furthest corners of the mines as far as possible and knows many interesting routes. I need exactly such a person so I don't get lost in those tunnels. Similar incidents have already happened. I don't want to repeat them. Well, if everything's good with you, then I wish you luck. Be sure to send photos. And don't disappear yourself, so you're flying tomorrow morning. Yeah, at 6. Good thing the flight isn't long. I hate long flights, damn, that's early. So we won't play today. No need, I'll have to go to bed early. I need to get up at 3. Haven't even packed for the trip yet. All right, then I'm out. Stay in touch, write if anything. March 22nd, around noon, Jake wrote to his sister. By that time, the guy had already safely arrived, checked into a hotel, and even managed to take his first photos in Pittsburgh. Hey Emmy, good morning. Check out where I am. Jake sent his selfie against the backdrop of the Pittsburgh skyline, and a couple more shots from the very center of the Steel City. Jake, you're so annoying. I'm sitting here at work, withering away, and you're vacationing on the East Coast. How did you even end up there? Just came to photograph the local beauty. Haven't been anywhere for a long time. Yeah, tell me about it. Knowing your hobbies, you probably came on an excursion to some underground place. Do mom and dad even know? Listen, I'm 26, not 15. I can go without asking permission from my parents. And yes, so you understand, these will be the best photos on my blog. No abandoned buildings can compare. Oh, just do what you want. Just don't die there, please. Otherwise, Mom will eat my brain out later. I love you too, Emmy. Have a good workday, don't get sour. Oh yeah, forgot to say, go screw yourself. That same day, only much later in the evening, Jake wrote to his friend Eli that he had met with the guide Rance. In broken English, they discussed all the details of the upcoming trip to the mines. The guy's mood was upbeat. The thirst for adventure overcame all other feelings. March 23rd. On this very day, Jake finally realized his dream and descended into the Pennsylvania underground. At 8 in the morning, he sent a short message to his friend, heading out, and was unavailable almost all day. Only late in the evening did the guy reappear online to share the emotions that had accumulated after a long hike. Eli, that was something else. I'm just in wild delight. Down there, you feel like part of a big history, no matter how pretentious that sounds. Just imagine. The remains of 7,000 people who died in mining accidents are displayed for all to see. Tourists can still see walls and ceilings that are completely lined with mining equipment and personal belongings. The mines buried people who died in the Great Depression, as well as victims of terrible industrial accidents of the early 20th century, including gas explosions. Remember those movies about coal miners and grim American industrial towns of the 1900s? This is all from that category. Damn, you know what I like most about your adventures? That you genuinely get high from this. I mean, really, someone likes to travel the seas, see different countries, study foreign culture, and you climb into godforsaken places just to get your dose of dopamine. Jake, are you definitely from our universe? Well, to each their own. Tastes are not disputed. Yeah, you're right. The main thing is to live for pleasure and enjoy what you do. That way life becomes simpler and brighter. Are you going to send me photos? I really haven't looked at them myself yet, but they seem to have turned out pretty good. Well, of course, I live only for them. At this moment, Jake began sending photos of his stay in the Pennsylvania mines. He started with a shot of an unusual structure of ash-black color. This was one of the numerous entrances to the underground. Inside was a spiral staircase leading deep underground. This is exactly how urban explorers usually got into tunnels where they could illegally, but freely get their dose of adrenaline. Next followed several frames of how the guy was going down the steps, how he finally emerged into the corridor of the mines, and how he first saw piles of equipment neatly stacked along the walls. If the first shots were taken in lit sectors, where various patterns and arches laid out from mining tools were visible, then after a couple of photos, the space around noticeably changed. Helmets and equipment now chaotically lay underfoot. You could calmly walk on them, and in some particularly narrow tunnels even crawl. Also, various graffiti was everywhere, which became less and less with each new frame. The guys were moving deeper into the closed sections of the mines, and eventually reached places where it was already difficult to determine when a human foot had last stepped there. And it was on one of these photos, in the very heart of the Pennsylvania underground, that the mysterious silhouette was first captured. Later, it would become a stumbling block in solving the question of where the guy could have disappeared from his apartment, locked from the inside. Eli, who had been carefully examining his friend's photos all this time, was the first to notice the human-like figure. He immediately wrote about it to Jake. Jake was no less surprised. Listen, explorer, didn't you two go down together? Well, yeah, together. Why do you ask? Well, because you have someone else in one of your photos. Or is this some kind of joke? The guy forwarded a shot where Jake was depicted together with Rance. They had taken a selfie in one of the corridors. In the background, right around the corner, a blurry dark silhouette was visible. Someone was quietly peeking from around the corner, as if deliberately wanting to get into the frame while not scaring the guys. Whoa, listen, I didn't see this. Was someone following us? Oh, come on, stop fooling around. Don't worry, one of your new buddies is clowning around there, and you're pranking me here. Damn, I'm serious though. Want me to write to Rance now? He'll confirm everything for you. Okay, I believe you, but still write to him. Maybe he knows what kind of guy this is. Probably some local decided to prank you, and you immediately got scared. Yeah, not scared, just not very pleasant when someone's watching you from undercover. Anyway, as soon as I find out, I'll write back. I'm curious myself now. Okay, I'll wait. In any case, don't worry. You came up to the surface, everyone's alive and well. That's the most important thing. By the way, when are you planning to return? Did you already buy a return ticket? Yeah, tomorrow at noon I'm flying home. I won't go anywhere else. I'll sleep in my room all day. I'm tired as a dog. Now that's what I call a vacation. All right, let's chat more. I'm going to do some business. Stay in touch. March 24th. Let's skip the messages Jake sent to his relatives. There was nothing special in them. He sent his parents photos from downtown Pittsburgh his sister a couple of creepy shots from the depths of the mines. But closer to night, when the guy flew back home, such an interesting dialogue happened with his friend. "Hi, are you awake? I have news." "No, I'm not asleep." "What did Rance tell you?" "He didn't answer me. He just ignored me and then blocked me as soon as I sent him that photo. Just yesterday we were crawling through the underground together, and everything was cool. And now, he suddenly stopped communicating with me." "Well, so what? Why are you so mad at him?" "Well, he blocked you, so what? Screw him. He got his money, you're no longer interesting to him. Everything's logical here." Yeah, only my question remained unanswered. What was that creep in the mines, and why was he hiding in the dark? I decided to play around with filters here and see what came of it. Jake sent a modified photo on which that stranger was captured. The contrast was turned to minimum, and the brightness was increased, thanks to which the silhouette became much more clearly visible. This was a human figure, only very tall and in some kind of black clothing. There was no hair or anything else on the head. Only a white mask was visible on the face, which looked quite frightening in the dark. Damn, that's creepy. Who in their right mind would want to do such things? I wouldn't last 2 seconds there without light, and this dude apparently just wandered after you without a flashlight. Yeah, and I don't know who this is. And this bastard Rance apparently knows. Otherwise, how to explain such a strange reaction to an ordinary question? Listen, it seems to me that you need to just let the situation go. You got out of there, flew home, and thank God. Just consider this a lesson for the future that it's time to stop testing fate. I understand everything. You're a desperate guy and love risk, but there should be at least some breaks. You never know what psychos are in our world. What if someone comes out from around the corner at another abandoned place, hits you with a hammer, and then they'll be looking for little Jake in bags? Do you need that? No, of course not. Perhaps you're right. It's time to give up all these travels. Otherwise, I might really get into trouble. As soon as I arrived, I didn't even have time to unpack my suitcases. I immediately loaded the photo into Photoshop and started examining it. Well, that's great. I'm glad you've come to your senses. Forget about this topic. What was. Don't worry, some junkie or Satanist probably followed you, and you made a mountain out of a molehill. Come on, let's sit and play. I already managed to miss your screaming. Damn well, you're quite the psychologist. Wait, I'll connect in 30 minutes. March 25th. The real horror began on this day. Jake again wrote to his friend. The guy looked confused, and he began to notice something strange. Listen, Eli, you're probably already tired of my whining, but I need your advice. I just don't know who else to turn to. Bro, you're acting like we haven't known each other for 20 years. What happened? Maybe I'll call you and you'll tell me everything. No, it's somehow easier for me to convey this through messages. So look at this. Jake sent a photo from last year to the chat. On it, he was relaxing with friends at a country house. The shot was taken in the yard near a summer kitchen. The guys were sitting at a table and actively discussing something. In the background stood a rural house with 2 small windows. In one of them, a slightly blurred silhouette was visible, carefully watching the guy. According to Jake, yesterday it wasn't there. As if someone had the ability to independently move through different frames, and at the same time was getting closer and closer. This was noticeable from his other photos, which the guy sent literally in a few seconds. Look, it's now present in almost every shot. How can this even be explained? So wait, you're not joking right now. This definitely isn't Photoshop. No, of course not. I sent you these photos in summer. We were gathering at the country house. Tommy was still there, the one who was dating Rachel. Yeah, I remember. I remember these photos too. But this freak wasn't there. That's what I'm talking about. And most importantly, look how close it stands to me and stares only at me, although there are several other people in the frame. What should I do? I couldn't have picked up anything there, could I? Yeah, so now we'll figure it out. You just don't panic, okay? The internet has never let me down. It will find this too. And Victor didn't lie. He really found an article by one French author who was engaged in spiritual practices and demonology, an occult science that studies demons, evil spirits, their intrigues against humans. This article featured Pennsylvania mines and what is undesirable to do when you go down and find yourself in the territory of eternal darkness. Listen, buddy, did you happen to take anything from there as a souvenir? Some trinket or something else? No, of course not. What do you think I am, a looter? It's just that there's a case described here almost like yours. A guy decided to take some bone with him from that underground, and then some nasty thing started chasing him. Maybe this is, of course, a local creepypasta, but there's already some similarity, don't you think? No, I definitely didn't take any bones from there. And no souvenirs either, although wait, hold on a minute. At this moment, Jake paused for a moment. There were no messages from him for about 10 minutes, but then he returned to his interlocutor, shocking him with new details. Oh, I almost forgot. Rance gave me this when we were down below, some kind of coal amulet, said it was for good luck for free. The guy attached a photo of a handmade pendant that the guide had kindly given him. Well, buddy, there's the root of your problem. I don't understand what you mean. Yeah, your Rance apparently screwed up big time himself. Made some trinkets from human remains, and then this thing started hunting him. Well, and to deflect the blow from himself, basically, you understand. And what should I do now? He doesn't answer me. How can I return the amulet to him now? Damn, I don't know. If everything really is as you say, and this isn't your crappy Photoshop, then you have only one way out. Buy tickets and fly back to Pennsylvania. You need to somehow do the same thing as your French buddy did. Take someone to the mines and give them the pendant. At least that's what's written in the article. Damn, how could I get into such a mess? No, from now on, no more abandoned places. No more bunkers, caves, tunnels, and so on. I've had enough. I've wandered enough. Damn, bro, honestly, I still doubt that you're not pranking me. It looks more like another one of your jokes. Like when you buy a ticket back to Pennsylvania, then I'll believe you. Until then, if you'll excuse me, I have a lot of work. If anything, I'm in touch. March 26th. Jake wrote to his friend at 11:30 at night. Lee, I was just coming home from my shift and saw something. Oh, come on, no riddles. What's there? Remember that deserted industrial zone behind Kensington? The one I usually walk through to the bus stop, where it's always dark and there's a railroad crossing. Well, yeah, I remember. We walked there together. I just met that tall silhouette there. Come on, you're lying. I swear to you by everything dear to me. I tried to film it on video, but it was too dark on the street. Look at this. Jake dropped clips where he was walking quickly down the street and constantly looking back. carefully trying to catch someone on camera. His nervous breathing indicated that the guy was very frightened and afraid to take any action. I don't even know what to answer you. How did it look exactly the same as in the photos? Exactly the same. Damn, I didn't think it was so huge. More than 7 feet for sure. Walks like a human, but the movements are somehow unnatural. Sways from side to side. Didn't step away from me until I reached the bus stop. So maybe it's not him, but just some homeless guy went for a walk. I remember those places. The homeless are the most harmless you can meet there. No, you don't understand. This figure looked exactly like in the pictures. Black clothing, pale porcelain face, and that smile. God, it's stalking me. Do you understand or not? Okay, calm down. I believe you. Tell me, did you already take the return ticket or not? I took it, but only for the 30th. All the nearest dates are already sold out. Damn, that's bad. Okay, I think we'll hold out. I'll come to your city on the 28th at noon. We'll meet and discuss everything. You just don't open doors to anyone and go out less in the dark. Do you have tomorrow off? Tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow. Well, that's great. Sit at home, rest, and gather strength. I'll come and we'll sort everything out. Okay, yeah, good. Eli, thank you so much. I don't know who else to turn to besides you. Probably no one else would believe me. You're thinking correctly. Better not tell anyone, otherwise they'll think you've lost your mind. Okay, write or call if something happens. Good night. March 27th. This is Jake's last message before that fateful call. They were sent, like the day before, closer to midnight. Eli, can I start panicking now? Or is it still too early? The guy sent a photo of his courtyard. You could see how someone was hiding in the darkness, standing near the garages and peering into the windows of the 5-story panel building. Is that him standing near your house? Yeah, for about 20 minutes now. I didn't want to write to you right away, thought everything would sort itself out somehow, but he apparently doesn't plan to go anywhere. I was already thinking of calling the cops, but damn, what would I tell them? Well, yeah, probably not worth it yet. Maybe he'll leave like yesterday, and if you show the photo, they'll laugh. They'll say an adult man got scared of some drug addict. You hopefully locked all the doors, several locks, and the entrance door too. I checked the intercom today, it works. Well, that's great. And through the window, it definitely can't get to you on the 4th floor, so you're protected. What do you think this is? It's clearly not human, but some kind of creature. A demon or something like that. It sways like a tree and looks straight at me. Even though I turned off all the lights and am standing behind the curtain. Listen, I have no idea. But the fact that it follows you everywhere and even knows where you live is a very bad sign. After Victor's message, there was a short lull. It lasted about 15 minutes before Jake wrote to the chat again. This time, he was much more frightened. There was less and less time until the call. Holy crap, what? What's there, damn? As soon as I stepped away from the window, this nasty thing immediately disappeared somewhere. Well, isn't that good? I don't think so. I have a bad feeling, bro. Just relax. Hold on until tomorrow. I'll come and together it won't be so scary. I think it doesn't need doors to get into my apartment. Why do you think that? Because it's crawling up the wall of the house right now. Get out of there urgently. Do you hear? Wait, I'll call you now. The call log statistics on the found phone showed that night, Eli tried to call Jake several times. But for some reason, he didn't pick up. Today, we can only build assumptions and guesses about what was happening in the guy's apartment at that moment. Between the last text message and the 911 call was a difference of several minutes. Probably the creature was able to somehow penetrate the house through the kitchen window, after which the young man decided to hide in the closet. Why he didn't immediately leave the apartment remains a mystery to this day. Police couldn't find any traces of blood or other evidence. Only during the inspection of the bedroom was a still working mobile phone found, from which the guy made that very last call. The man himself was declared missing, as after that night, no one ever saw him again. Anonymous letter dated October 15th, 2024. You don't know my name, and probably never will, but I know about you. I've heard you're an excellent journalist. That's my honest opinion. The way you dig to find the truth inspires me, gives me hope that there are still people in this world who aren't afraid to speak the truth. Because that's where all the power lies, isn't it? Everything you're about to hear in this story has been changed. Of course, for safety reasons, I suspect certain people are involved. Well, you get it. Though hell knows what really happened. I have some theories about it, but let me tell everything in order. It all started that night when something happened at the local facility, the one located just outside our town of Mill Creek. Around 3 in the morning, there was a powerful bang, like an explosion, that instantly woke me up. I immediately jumped out of bed and went to check what the hell had just blown up. From my bedroom window, I had a clear view of that place. I could see that something had definitely exploded at the Next Gen research facility. Flames engulfed the entire roof, and from the scale of the fire, it was already clear to me that something serious had happened. Soon, through the open window, I heard the wailing of fire truck sirens rushing to help the industrial giant that, according to the paperwork, supposedly produced advanced pharmaceuticals and medical equipment. At least, that's what everyone said. No one really asked questions about it. I worked at a small grocery store and didn't worry about anything beyond that. Besides the flashes of fire that night, I noticed something else strange. At one moment, bright green light columns emerged from the blaze, as if someone had turned on powerful searchlights and aimed them straight into the sky. It looked so unusual that I was even a bit confused. I thought, maybe I'm seeing things. But the sounds from the open window made it clear that I wasn't. After a while, I got tired of watching this spectacle. I closed the window and went back to sleep for the rest of the night. The next day was my day off. I didn't need to get up early or go anywhere. No business or errands. I had bought groceries in advance so I wouldn't have to run back and forth. In general, I was fully prepared to stay home and mess around on the computer all day. But my plans weren't meant to come true. As soon as I got out of bed and approached the window, I immediately saw the full scale of the night's incident. Nothing was visible outside. The entire town was shrouded in thick smog, as if the fire from the facility's roof had spread to the nearby forest. I thought it was good that I had closed the window, or all that stench would be filling my apartment right now. This thought was confirmed by a text message from emergency services that came around 6 in the morning. It said that all residents should avoid going outside, lock all windows and doors, and if possible, block ventilation with something. Clearly, the fire was serious. Some dangerous chemicals were burning for them to raise such a fuss. I carefully observed the situation for a while, then moved away from the window and went about my morning routine. Of course, I didn't forget to follow the authorities' recommendations. I stuffed rags into the ventilation openings in the kitchen and bathroom. I was guided by simple logic. If everything outside is so bad, then it's better not to show off and do as they say, rather than catch some disease later and regret it for the rest of my life. I can't say exactly when the internet and electricity went out, but when I made myself breakfast, brewed coffee, and wanted to watch something on YouTube, there was no Wi-Fi on my phone. Hell, even cell service wasn't working, as if I was in some underground bunker and not in a busy little town. From that moment, an information blockade began. Due to the lack of electricity, I couldn't turn on the radio, watch news on TV, or check local social media pages online. Already then, I had the feeling that this would last a long time, but I continued to believe for the best. I thought that maybe in an hour or 2 or 3, they'd turn the power back on. However, time passed, and they still didn't give us electricity. And honestly, this was starting to stress me out a bit. Outside the window, a white haze was thickening, which seemed like you could touch with your hand. You couldn't see the sky, neighboring houses, or what was happening on the street, if anything was happening at all. Because essentially, behind closed windows, I couldn't hear the sounds of cars, people's voices, or anything else. Only occasionally would the city siren turn on, once again confirming the fact that it was better not to stick your nose outside yet. But even that soon fell silent. I had thoughts that all the few residents of the town had been evacuated beyond the settlement while I was sleeping, and they just took and left me. You know, just for fun. It was hard to explain what was happening any other way. Time was approaching late evening when I decided to forget about my shyness and go ask the neighbors if they knew what the hell was going on. Why we'd been sitting without power all day, and what this damn fog outside the window was, which looked more like an accumulation of toxic gases. I was destined to get answers to these questions a little later. But for now, I went out to the landing and began to look around carefully. There was dead silence in the building, as if no one else lived there besides me. Not a single rustle. Usually, you can hear someone cooking, arguing, or watching TV. But here, nothing. If it weren't for the familiar walls painted green, I probably would have thought that someone had moved me to an abandoned house during the night. First, I knocked on my neighbor Mrs. Patterson's door. She was a good woman, never argued with anyone, always treated everyone to various goodies, and generally was a person with the kindest soul. At first, she didn't open the door. I was about to turn and go to other neighbors, when suddenly, I heard a light creak of door hinges behind me. In the open doorway, I saw a dark silhouette of a woman silently standing in the corridor of her apartment. She was drilling me with her gaze, as if it was because of me that she couldn't watch her favorite TV show. "Mrs. Patterson, hello. This is Ethan from across the hall. Do you know what's happening? Why hasn't there been power all day?" No answer followed. The neighbor still stood in the corridor and silently stared at me. Her face wasn't visible, although I had kept my phone's flashlight on the whole time and could easily shine it on her. But that would be rude, so I just continued talking to myself. "Mrs. Patterson, can you hear me? Are you all right?" After this phrase, the woman came to life a bit. She suddenly sharply tilted her head to the side, and with such speed that her neck actually cracked. That's when I couldn't stand it anymore and directed the flashlight straight at my neighbor's face, finally seeing what was hidden in the darkness. It was Mrs. Patterson. Well, her body anyway, but the soul was foreign, as if someone had possessed the person and could now control their every step. The woman's appearance had also undergone some changes. Her arms, along with her fingers, had become longer. Her spine had stretched out a bit, and a hump had appeared. But all this couldn't compare to her terrifying face that flashed in the flashlight beam for just a moment. The monster's lower jaw had split into two halves, and then its mouth opened, revealing teeth as sharp as razors. I also remember bright red eyes with black pupils, and this despite the fact that just yesterday I had seen Mrs. Patterson on the porch. We were both healthy, talked for about 5 minutes, and went our separate ways. And now she had turned into some crazy creature that wanted only one thing: to tear me to pieces for no reason at all. I didn't have time to blink before she knocked me down onto the cold concrete floor and, clicking her jaw, tried to reach my face. Her claws scraped against the floor as she lunged at me. The story would have ended there if my neighbor from the left hadn't decided to step in for me at that moment. He had been standing behind his door the whole time, waiting for the right moment. He knew what would happen, but didn't want to come out too early. That was his advantage. As soon as the monster ended up on the floor with me, the neighbor's door immediately opened, and a guy shouting, "Get off him, you freak," started beating her over the head with a hammer. I don't know by what miracle he didn't hit me then, but it worked perfectly. After the third or fourth blow, the creature's body went limp, and it collapsed on me with all its lifeless weight. "Hey, Ethan, you alive or what?" "Let me help," said the neighbor, immediately rushing over to help me drag the disfigured body of the old woman off me. "Yeah, Frank, thank you so much. What's happening here? What was wrong with Mrs. Patterson? Why did she attack me?" "I'll explain later, okay? We need to treat your wounds urgently so there's no infection. Come on in. It's too dangerous out here." I knew Frank only slightly. We occasionally crossed paths at the store during my work shifts. I didn't really know much about him, except that he was supposedly an engineer at that pharmaceutical facility. He was clearly better prepared than the rest of us, and this was evident not only from his behavior. When I went inside Frank's apartment and looked around the entire space, I was very surprised. Frank seemed to be preparing for nuclear conflict. His windows, both in the kitchen and bedroom, were sealed with plastic. In an open closet, I could see 3 or even 4 brand new chemical protection suits with gas masks, spare filters, and various pouches. On the table lay a hunting rifle and a bunch of cartridges for it, as if he was preparing for defense or maybe an attack. "Ethan, here's some hydrogen peroxide. Here's a bandage. I think you know what to do. I'll go to the kitchen and prepare something to eat." Hydrogen peroxide. I thought I needed antibiotics or something else more serious. "Dude, what? Have you been watching too many zombie movies?" "Don't worry. You won't turn into one of those creatures, as long as you don't want to go outside without a gas mask." "What do you mean? It's all that fog outside. It makes people go crazy." "You know what? Let's do this. You treat your wounds now, and I'll prepare some tea and something to eat. After that, at the table, I'll tell you everything. Deal?" I nodded satisfactorily to my neighbor and went to the bathroom to treat my wounds. About 20 minutes later, Frank and I were sitting in the kitchen, having a lively conversation about what was happening around us. Well, having a conversation. Mostly I asked questions and he answered them. And from the outside, it looked more like an interrogation. So, can you finally tell me what kind of crap is happening in the town? Is this some kind of epidemic? Well, you could say that, although I'm not strong on terminology. It's all because of that gas you observed outside the window. It's some kind of secret development by our scientists, something like biological weapons. A friend and colleague of mine told me about it. What biological weapons? At a pharmaceutical facility? How am I supposed to understand this? Hey, slow down. I understand your indignation, but it's not my fault. I'm just an engineer, and my access level was close to zero. They only let me look at equipment, and even then, only a couple of times a month. Everything was run by eggheads from headquarters. Go complain to them. The man took a pack of cigarettes from his pocket and offered me one, but I politely declined. He chuckled, pulled one out, crumpled it in his hand, and then put it back. Apparently, he was trying to quit. You have to understand, I couldn't tell anyone where I worked. The security level was very high. If the security service had found out about this, they would have skinned me alive. Well, judging by the arsenal hanging in your closet, you knew perfectly well what could happen. Where does an ordinary engineer get such information? Like I said, a friend told me. He was one of those who developed this weapon, or virus, call it what you want. First, they tested it on rats, identified weak elements, then fixed them and tested again. And so on for several years. But relatively recently, the first human trials were conducted, and what my buddy told me shocked me. Frank leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on the chair, and began to speak a little quieter, as if he was afraid that someone might overhear us. What you saw there in the hallway is pathetic child's play, just the first stage of mutation. That's when you can still hit them with a hammer on the head and they'll fall dead. But in just a few days, they'll start getting stronger, more dangerous, and agile. Even special forces and automatic weapons won't help then. You'll have to smoke them out with artillery. There's no other way. And knowing all this, you continued to stay in town and work for these barbarians. So it turns out, and let's use you instead of formal address, I feel like some old man. I'm only 48, not 70. And secondly, I didn't get my diploma to earn $30,000 a month. This corporation paid me very good money. Any fool would have agreed to work there in my place. Well, I don't know. Weren't you afraid that something like this would happen? A leak and all that. Well, such thoughts did come to mind. Yeah, you see, I even decided to play it safe. My friend Billy advised me, told me how everything works, what to do in case of an emergency. But who knew they'd screw up so badly at that facility? The security level there was such that, mamma mia, they definitely couldn't have been attacked from outside. So something happened inside. Well, yeah, there was an explosion last night, or didn't you hear? What explosion? I slept like the dead. Even a cannon wouldn't wake me up. In the morning, I wake up and see this haze outside the window, sirens wailing as if the apocalypse had begun. That's when I realized what was happening, but it was already too late. Good thing I closed all the windows, or I'd be walking around like Mrs. Patterson, looking for fresh meat. The man paused briefly, sipped tea from his mug, then took the lantern that had been standing on the table the whole time and moved it away from the window. He was probably afraid that someone might notice us. We need to get out of town right now, as soon as possible. We have 2 days at most, maybe 3. I don't know what's going on outside, but I can assume it's nothing good. Maybe we should wait for the authorities, the army, I don't know. They know what's happening here. Ethan, don't reason like a child, I'm asking you. No one will help us except ourselves. There won't be another chance to escape. Damn, I don't even know. This is all so scary. What if the suits don't help, or we run into a crowd of those creatures and they tear us apart? Well, if you're afraid of wolves, don't go into the forest. At least you'll have some chance this way. If you stay here, you'll definitely die, either from hunger or from something worse. It's up to you to decide. Tomorrow I'm leaving at dawn. You'll have the whole night ahead to think about it. Whether you're with me or not, I hope you make the right decision. That's it, I'm going to sleep. Good night. The choice was obvious. Subconsciously, I understood that going outside could cost me my life, but it was even worse to sit in one place and stupidly wait for my end. So yes, I agreed to go on the expedition with Frank, especially since he seemed to know what needed to be done and was prepared, if not for everything, then for a lot. As soon as the sun rose and light began to penetrate through the darkness of night, we changed into protective suits, put on gas masks, and set off. I armed myself with a fire axe that Frank had in his storage room. I don't know where he got it, but it was quite a lethal thing. Well, Frank, of course, took the rifle. We also took backpacks with us to fill them with food along the way. The road wasn't close, and we only had pots of soup and dumplings in our refrigerators, so we had food problems. We had to include a little looting in our plan. Although, judging by what I saw later on the city streets, it was more like using ownerless property. Our neighborhood was relatively calm. Familiar cars stood parked in the places where neighbors usually left them. Only a tangible fog flickered before our eyes, and in gas masks with new filters, it seemed that it posed no danger. However, as soon as we moved toward the town square through the main avenues, I literally began to pray that this stuff wouldn't somehow seep through some crack. There was a real nightmare on the streets. Broken buses and other transport that usually appeared in the morning on city streets. People didn't even suspect what danger this smog posed. They calmly left their homes, got in their cars, and went about their business. And within a few minutes, they showed the first signs of infection. How exactly this process occurred is still unknown to me, but the end result was about the same as with Mrs. Patterson. A person turned into a crazy creature and didn't realize their actions. Fits of uncontrollable rage would come over them, and they could suddenly attack and tear apart even their own kind, then walk away as if nothing had happened. Naturally, we encountered them more than once on our way. I could observe the behavior of these monsters with my own eyes. Some of them looked like ordinary people, just slightly wandering around the streets, sometimes stumbling, but not immediately. Only after a certain time, when the feeling of hunger becomes overwhelming and constant. That's exactly why Frank was in a hurry to leave the city limits before all its infected residents began tearing down the remnants, breaking windows, and breaking down doors. And honestly, they didn't pay much attention to us. I mean those who hadn't completely lost their minds from hunger yet. We showed no aggression toward them and walked around them. And if we saw particularly fierce individuals, we immediately hid in cover and waited there for some time. It's one thing to handle a lone ambush together, but another to go against a crowd. The enraged ones easily overturned vans and broke down doors. So hiding behind a car, we almost got into trouble when one of the zombies literally came right up to us. It was a young man with the same characteristic features as Mrs. Patterson. At first, he stood in place and mindlessly stared at us, but then his behavior began to change sharply. He suddenly roared and turned his head to the side exactly like that, which made me think it was time for us to get out of here. However, everything worked out then. Slowly, without sudden movements, we got up and walked in the opposite direction, not forgetting to glance at this guy. He stood there for a while longer, but then completely lost interest in us and continued to wander aimlessly through the city streets. As our initial target, we chose the store where I worked. First, I had the keys to it. The owner trusted me and even sometimes had me cover when I was sick and couldn't come to work. Second, simple concealment. The little shop was located in a one-story separate building in a small area without huge shop windows. You could rest a bit there and not be afraid that some mutant was lurking behind a shelf, wanting to finish you off. And no one from the street would see us if everything had gone as we planned. But of course, the plan fell through. As soon as we entered the avenue I usually walked to work, figures appeared in the fog about 30 meters from us. They were military personnel in some kind of advanced gear. Each soldier held an automatic weapon pointed at the ground, but ready to aim and fire if necessary. As soon as they came into our field of vision, I immediately rejoiced like a little child, started waving my hands and calling them over. For the first time in all this nightmare, it seemed to me that here was our salvation. But judging by how Frank tensed up and tapped me on the shoulder, something was clearly wrong. And soon, I was able to understand what exactly. Stop, don't move. Drop your weapons on the ground. Right after the soldiers noticed us, 2 rifle barrels were pointed in our direction. A moment later, the one standing in the center fired a warning shot into the ground, apparently wanting to show the seriousness of his intentions. I won't repeat myself. I'm giving you 3 seconds. Frank and I didn't wait for a hail of bullets to fly at us, and threw down everything we had in our hands. Lie down on the ground. Now, lie down on the ground. At the moment when I was following all the above orders, hope still warmed in me that these were just security measures. Now they'd check us, understand that we were just victims of circumstances, and help us evacuate from the contamination zone. But no such luck. A few seconds passed, and this whole company approached us lying on the wet ground, completely defenseless. After that, such an interesting dialogue occurred. Base, this is Smith. How do you copy? Over. I hear you perfectly, Smith. What's your status? We have 2 civilians in gas masks on Lennon Avenue. Confiscated a rifle from one, the second had an axe. They seem clean. Clean or dirty, what's the difference? Anyone you encounter on the way, eliminate them. Orders from above. And then my heart almost sank into my boots. Can you imagine? I'm a civilian, an ordinary resident of the town who became a hostage to some kind of experiment. They should have found me themselves and pulled me out of this shit, not put my face in the asphalt and shoot me like a rabid dog. I declared this very emotionally to our captors. What the hell? We're civilians. Shut up quickly. I got kicked right in the ribs and immediately fell silent, looking anxiously at Frank. Frank was calm as Buddha. He silently looked at me, apparently having already resigned himself to the fact that we were both finished. Colonel, sir, I understand everything, but still, this is not up for discussion. Follow orders. The next few seconds, were perhaps the longest and most anxious in my life. Some soldiers pointed their automatic weapons at us and waited for this smith's command. He held a radio in his hands, standing there in his gas mask. At one point, when it seemed to me that the officer had given the go-ahead for execution, a muffled human scream suddenly came from somewhere to the side, followed by automatic gunfire. But not at us, but at those creatures that suddenly jumped out of the fog and attacked one of the soldiers who was standing farther from the rest. The guy couldn't even scream. Even their gear couldn't prevent his nightmarish death. By the way, they came to their senses almost immediately, but it was already too late. Fire, fire. At this point, a fierce battle began. The infected, gathering in a pack, crawled to the place of our capture. There weren't 10 or 20 of them, but many more, and this was just from one shot. Imagine what noise arose when 5 automatic weapons almost simultaneously began pouring lead at everything that moved in their direction. This wouldn't lead to anything good, and therefore Frank and I had a new plan. "Hey Ethan, time to go. Crawl to that wall quickly." Frank pointed to an alley through which we could quietly leave the avenue and hide among the old 2-story buildings. There was less likelihood of encountering mutants there. And honestly, it's still not clear to me why we didn't initially go through the courtyards, but that's in the past. How Frank and I got out of that hell was like escaping from some concentration camp. Bullets whistled around. Screams and howls of soldiers being eaten alive could be heard. Neither weapons nor years of training could help them cope with a horde of cannibals. With each minute, there were more and more of them, and the only chance to escape was flight. Very soon, we finally crawled to that alley and managed to remain unnoticed. The monsters were completely focused on the military, of whom only 2 remained by that time. They tried to hold the defense to the last, but their automatic weapons soon choked too, and except for screams and roars of the infected, nothing else could be heard on that avenue. We ran without looking at the road, bursting through fences and huge puddles, just to get away from that cursed place. And although I subconsciously understood that those soldiers could have easily shot us, I still felt incredibly sorry for them. I wouldn't wish such a fate even on enemies. And here, seemingly normal guys who knew that you can't just kill people, even if commanded to. But they still gave the order to shoot everyone indiscriminately. The question arises, why? Frank had a guess about this, and he eagerly voiced it right after he stopped near some garages to rest a bit. "Well, did you hear that? They decided to clean up all the witnesses. The bastard says to eliminate everyone. Yeah, if only we could reach some journalists. Too bad our phones are dead, can't even film all this chaos." The man leaned against the wall and slid down, squatting. I followed his example, especially since I had no strength left to run, and I wanted to catch my breath a bit. "Do you think they won't let us out? I mean, maybe we can somehow negotiate. Not everyone there is so crazy as to shoot civilians." "Don't talk nonsense. Haven't you figured it out yet? They've blocked the entire town, put jammers on cell service, cut off electricity, and all this to isolate us from the outside world. This is a damn experiment, and we're the test subjects." "What experiment? What do you mean?" "Damn, I'm not an engineer. I'm a research scientist." "Got it. I don't have any friend Billy. I made all that up so you wouldn't ask too many questions and look at me like you are now. You should have seen my face when I heard all this. Of course, I initially had doubts. Frank clearly knew in advance and was preparing for such a turn of events. But this revelation still shocked me. I just can't believe it. So how do you like the result? You've doomed the entire town. You think I wanted this? They immediately removed me from development as soon as I found out about their plans and tried to sabotage everything. They took away my phone, set up surveillance, wouldn't let me leave town. Damn, I couldn't even talk to anyone for the last few weeks. Can you imagine what that was like for me? The man almost broke into a shout, no longer paying attention to the fact that we could be heard. It was clear that he sincerely worried about everything happening around and was angry no less than me. Okay, don't yell. We don't need them to finish us off behind these garages. Don't act like a child. The world doesn't consist of rainbow ponies. And anyway, if it weren't for me, you'd be lying dead in the hallway right now, or worse, digesting in the old woman's stomach. So have at least a little gratitude. Having finished his thought, Frank calmed down again. I was about to give him a sharp answer, but in the end decided to just stay silent. This helped normalize the situation and return to reasonable dialogue. You know, Ethan, I developed this escape plan over several weeks. As soon as I learned that these monsters planned to poison the entire town, I immediately started looking for options. I tried to approach and talk to someone, but security service employees followed me everywhere, and then they even called me in for interrogation. I don't know why they didn't eliminate me right away. Probably, I unwittingly became part of their experiment. Like, can a person who has the whole picture survive in this meat grinder? Or will he perish like everyone else? Oh, now it's clear where you got so many useful things. I thought you were just cautious. But it turns out you were also just part of this damn experiment. Pawns they simply decided to remove. Understand, everything you see around you now is testing new biological weapons, only on the scale of an entire settlement. And it's very simple. Everything is staged as an accident. An explosion at the facility, dangerous chemicals. This led to the death of hundreds of people, and all that. Although, knowing how much money was invested in this damn virus, I wouldn't be surprised if they're in cahoots with the media too. Next Gen Industries. That's not the only such project. There are dozens of them. And believe me, I heard such things there that my hair stands on end. Frank got up again and approached the road, then looked at the sky as if hoping to see something through the haze of fog. All right, you're right. We simply must survive to tell journalists about everything. People should know the truth about this corporation. They think they're gods and will bring them back to Earth. You know, I like your attitude. Just try not to lose it when we go down into the sewers. I've seen how the virus affects rats. It's not a sight for the faint-hearted. Wait, what sewers? Aren't there definitely other ways? If there were, I would never go down there. But this is the only way out. The town is surrounded. All roads are blocked. We can't get through on the ground. We don't have air transport. Only underground communications remain. This is a small but quite old town, and the tunnels go down the river beyond the settlement limits. We'll reach it and we're free. Just trust me, okay? And we'll succeed, I promise. And I trusted him. I believed we'd manage to get out, because good should always triumph over evil. Right? It should, but the price is sometimes immeasurably high. We slightly changed our route since our personal belongings and weapons remained on that cursed avenue, and wandering around shops was no longer so safe. Luckily, we encountered a broken kiosk along the way. There, I found a bottle of drinking water and some cookies. This would be enough to replenish our strength somewhere in a safe place and confidently continue moving. We got into the sewers through a manhole in the very center of town. It was founded back in the 15th century, and as you know, the older the settlement, the richer its underground world. When I was going down the ladder, I expected to see narrow passages full of sewage, dirt, and garbage. But how surprised I was when down there. Spacious drainage collectors made of red brick opened before me. The last rain had passed several days ago, so it was relatively dry and clean in the tunnels. We walked by a map that Frank had obtained somewhere in the city. I don't know how he managed to get it, but without a detailed diagram, it would have been difficult to navigate the underground labyrinth. Up there, when you see familiar roads and streets, you immediately understand which direction you need to move. But here it's complete darkness. Turn left twice, then right, and you don't know where the hell you are anymore. For the first time, everything was calm. We slowly moved through the tunnels, sometimes stopping and checking if there was anyone around the next turn. But then the situation changed dramatically. First, water began to drip quietly from the drainage pipes, which in general didn't particularly alarm us. This is sewerage. There are pipes everywhere, and something is always dripping. Soon the pressure increased a bit. The water became much dirtier, and small debris from the street began to float by. Even then, we should have sounded the alarm and urgently gotten out of the underground. But unfortunately, neither Frank nor I knew about such a phenomenon as a collector wave. This is a large flow of water in tunnels of underground rivers. Usually, storm drainage systems are connected to collectors. So during heavy rain, within a few minutes, the water level in the tunnel begins to rise rapidly. Its flow has great force and can knock a person off their feet if they are inside the system. Even in a diving suit, it would be difficult to survive. As you've already guessed, we happened to fall under just such a mess in that damn labyrinth. Everything happened so fast that I didn't even understand what had occurred at first. Somewhere in the distance, the sound of water was heard. Frank and I looked at each other, thinking it seemed like something to us. But then the wave came. The current intensified, rapidly raising the water level in the tunnel in a matter of seconds. I was incredibly lucky to be near the ladder leading to the manhole at that moment. I managed to grab onto it and climb up a bit, but Frank was much less fortunate. The only thing I heard from him was a quiet cry, after which he was carried away by the water flow. And that was it. Just like that, my neighbor and guide, the person who had saved my life, was gone. The rain ended, the water left the tunnels, and I had to continue the journey alone. I don't know, maybe it's another stroke of luck or a miracle, but very soon I found the exit from the underground communications. The very one that led me to the river beyond the city limits, to arrange a reckoning with those who really deserved it. Frank didn't make it. Shortly before his death, he told me that you're supposedly one of the best journalists on the planet. You have your own website and a good reputation that will help raise public outcry. Do this, if not for me, then at least for the unfortunate people who perished in that hell. Destroy this corporation before it destroys all of us. In the attachment, there will be all the information and coordinates of my town, Mill Creek. Until recently, it was featured on interactive maps, and now it can't be found anywhere. I hope you'll take this letter seriously and try to help me. With respect, your eternal well-wisher and friend. This happened about 5 years ago in the Pacific Northwest. For a bit of backstory, I'm originally from Oregon, and at the time my girlfriend, now wife, was visiting from another country over Christmas break. I lived in Portland, which if you drove about an hour in any direction would either lead to another city or beautiful nature. My friends and I decided to take my girlfriend to see some of this beautiful nature. I decided on a national park about an hour and a half from where we live. This place is definitely no sort of secret location. It's very well known, but there are a ton of different areas to it, all with different rural and windy roads taking you to the various areas of the park. We'd gone in 2 different cars, my friends in one and my girlfriend and I in another, to have some time together. We finished out the day of hiking, and we were heading home down one of the less common roads. I remember seeing this really beat-up old 70s sedan, with a wild-looking guy in the driver's seat drive, past us in the other direction. This wasn't uncommon, as there are a lot of smaller, less economically sound towns scattered around the area. But for some reason, him and his car stood out, and my girlfriend noticed it as well. About 300 meters further down the windy road, there was a pull-off area. Just a semicircle of gravel you could pull off to look at the view towards the ocean. There was a camper van belonging to a company that mostly rented out colorful vans to backpackers, parked there, with a woman standing in front of it. As soon as she sees us, she jumps out onto the road and flags us down. Now, I've read enough of these subs to know pulling in to help her on a quiet road wouldn't be the safest idea. But back then, I hadn't, and my friends were in the car directly behind us. Luckily, she wasn't the person I didn't want to meet. She was quite obviously upset and scared when we pulled in. I told my girlfriend to wait in the car, and I got out to speak to her. She was almost in tears. I can't remember where she was from, but it was a Central European country, from memory, touring around with her 5 or 6-year-old daughter. She told me her van had broken down, and she pulled off there, then called the van company's assistance line and was waiting for help. By this time, my friends had pulled in behind us, and a couple of them had come over to see what was up. Apparently, a scary man had driven past her a few times already. First time, pulling over to offer to take her and her daughter to the nearest town for help. She'd thanked him and said no, and that she was waiting for the assistance vehicle. He left, but then kept driving past every 15 to 20 minutes in opposite directions, slowing down and looking at them, then driving off. She begged us to stay with her while she waited for the assistance vehicle because the guy terrified her and her daughter. I agreed. My friends, being the awesome people they are, decided my girlfriend and I were enough, and they ditched us. Thanks, guys. We stayed with the woman for a little while before the car my girlfriend and I had seen earlier drove past, kind of slowly, coming the opposite way we'd seen him the first time. As soon as he'd driven around the bend, the lady told us that was the scary man that she'd been seeing before we got there. This got my girlfriend to take her much more seriously, after the feeling we got from this guy just seeing him on the road. A few minutes later, he came back from the other direction, and he pulled into the parking area. For a bit more context, I'm not an intimidating man. I'm tallish, but I have almost zero muscle and fairly soft features, so there's nothing at all intimidating about me. A terrified foreign woman, her tiny daughter, my girlfriend, who doesn't look that intimidating but is tough as nails, parked off a quiet road in a rural location with a not-so-nice-looking guy pulling in to where we were. Great. He gets out and is redneck as hell and definitely not friendly-looking. No judgment on the redneck part. I come from a poor country town north of our city, and those are my people, but hopefully that sets a picture. He strolls over to us. At this point, I walk towards him to put myself between the girls and him. I have no idea where this bravery came from. I would definitely not describe myself as a brave person normally. He looks at the girls, then me, and asks if he can help. I tell him, no, we're just waiting for the assistance vehicle, then say we've got it covered. He then says maybe he could stay and wait with the woman and her daughter so that we don't have to. I tell him we're happy to stay and thank him, but again, we've got it covered. He kind of just stood there for a while, staring at all of us, not really saying anything, giving off really creepy vibes. After what seemed like forever, another car drove past us and slowed down but kept going. This seemed to startle him. He mumbled, "Good luck," and got in his car and drove off. We waited with this poor, scared woman and her daughter for almost 2 hours. We ended up talking a lot, and hopefully, we made her opinions of Americans a bit brighter after the mega creep. Finally, the assistance vehicle arrived. A bigger guy who could definitely handle himself. I asked to see his ID and stuff to be safe, but he was in a car marked by the company. He had all the tools and definitely seemed legit. We gave the lady my number and asked her to text me when she was safe. She was so grateful to us for staying with her for such a long time. It made me feel good that even if this guy was just a weird-looking, awkward country guy that didn't mean any harm and was really just trying to help, we had still made her feel more comfortable in a strange country. I don't think he was, and definitely believe he was up to no good, but you never know. I did get a message from her to say she was safe, so everything ended well, but creepy mountain guy, let's not meet again. I'm in my late 60s now. This happened many years ago. I'd worked for most of my life as a forest surveyor, the kind of job that keeps you deep in the back country, hiking remote timberlands with a clipboard, compass, and silence for company. Over time, I developed a private obsession. Finding lost towns, not the ones on the tourist maps, the real ones. The settlements that had disappeared so completely, it was like they'd been swallowed whole by the land. Sometime in the late 90s, I came across a strange reference in a 1912 freight ledger from a regional rail line. It listed a handful of grain shipments going out from a station I didn't recognize. Just a name and a code. I double-checked maps, county records, even property archives. Nothing. It wasn't a station anyone had heard of, not a town listed in any history book. It was just a shadow in a ledger, last active in 1926. I tried twice to find it on my own, failed both times. By then, the forests had reclaimed everything. Old logging roads were gone. The rail spur that had once connected the area was reduced to a patch of rusted nails and earth depressions in the moss. On my third attempt, I brought my great-nephew. He was 14, sharp, grounded, respectful. I thought it might be good for him to spend a few days disconnected from the world, and I wouldn't mind help hauling gear. We hiked in over 3 days. The last trail we followed was barely that, more suggestion than path. But late on the third day, we found it. A shallow valley with 6 weathered buildings. 4 homes, a narrow wooden structure that might have been a school or chapel, and a single-room trading post. There were no roads, no recent signs of life. It was too remote, too well hidden. Everything was still. One of the homes looked like it had been left in a hurry. Furniture in place, a coat hanging by the door. Upstairs, a suitcase packed and left open on the bed. In the kitchen, a chair pushed back from the table, a plate and fork coated in a fine layer of dust and mold. They had felt interrupted, like someone had stood up in the middle of dinner and never came back. The store had a few cans left on the shelves, faded boxes of soap, a jar of candy that had turned into powder. Hand-painted signs for rope and dried goods. My nephew pointed out that there was no cash box, no ledger, no safe. Nothing of value, just the shell and the quiet. No birds, no insects, not even the usual forest sounds. I didn't notice at first. It was him who said it. Why is it so quiet? We stood there listening, and it was like the world had stopped outside the valley. Then we found the letter. It had slipped behind the cabinet in the store, sealed in a brittle envelope. I opened it, dated June 1926. The handwriting was shaky but legible. The writer, someone named Samuel, mentioned the loss of the elevator, no trains for weeks, and we can't stay any longer, not after what's happened. There was one more line, scribbled sideways along the bottom margin. They started acting strange when the last train came. We should have left sooner. That night we camped near the edge of the clearing. My nephew didn't sleep. Said he kept hearing footsteps in the woods. I told him it was just branches cracking, maybe a deer, but I didn't sleep either. At one point, I stepped away from the fire to relieve myself. The moon was out, full and white. From the edge of the tree line, I could see all 6 buildings clearly, and for a split second, just a blink, I could have sworn there was someone standing in the doorway of the farthest house. A tall, still figure, like a shadow that hadn't moved with the wind. When I blinked again, it was gone. I didn't mention it to the boy. We left first thing the next morning. We tried to go back a year later. Same trailhead, same direction, nothing. The clearing was gone or covered or had never been where we thought. Logging companies had moved through and everything had shifted. We spent 4 days searching. I never found it again. I still have the photos from that first trip, but they're all blurry, foggy, distorted, like they were taken through old glass. You can tell there are buildings, but they look warped somehow, as if the place didn't want to be captured properly. I've looked for more references in the years since. The name from the ledger doesn't show up in any official state record. It's not in the National Archives. That stretch of rail was torn up in the 30s, and the company went bankrupt by 43. It's like that place, and whatever happened there was scrubbed clean. My nephew still remembers it. We talked about it a few months ago. He said, "I don't think we were supposed to find it." And I think he's right. Some towns die, some are erased, but some, just a few, are left behind on purpose. If only Maya hadn't worn that stupid mask, things might have ended differently. I might have called off the whole trip and saved everyone. It all started as I stood at my mailbox, waiting like a little kid who had ordered a toy from a cereal box. The mailman usually came at 3, never failed, unless something had happened. I stood at my mailbox, staring at my watch that said 3:15. So what was the holdup? Did he have a flat tire? Did a terrorist attack? Did a bear grab him when he was trying to deliver me my precious delivery? Just as I was about to turn and go back to the house, I saw the little yellow light flashing on top of a car coming my way and nearly jumped out of my skin. This was it. If it didn't come today, there was no way I'd have time to order another one before leaving for the camping trip. The car slowly pulled up to the mailbox, and I said hello. Instead of putting the mail in the box, he handed me a few letters and looked away. My heart sank as he turned and faced the road. "Isn't there anything else for me?" I said, trying to keep the desperation out of my voice. He turned and looked in the back seat. "Oh, wait, it looks like there's something I forgot," he said, reaching into the back and handing me a brown envelope with the address on it I'd been looking for. He smiled and waved as he drove off, leaving me holding my prize. This was going to be a good camping trip now. I nearly skipped back to the house, threw the other mail on the table without looking at it, before ripping open the package. There it was, my glorious book light. I'm an avid reader and an avid camper. It's always been a struggle to read during camping trips. I took along various battery-powered lamps and flashlights, but nothing seemed to work for me. Getting comfortable enough to really settle into my book was a challenge. When I saw this light advertised on Instagram, I instantly knew this was what I needed. It was a book light that wrapped around your neck with a light at each end that would shine on the book. There was no doubt it would be perfect, and I ordered one right away. Finally, I could finish packing for the camping trip. My friends and I love to go hiking and camping with a huge state park so close. It was a no-brainer that we would be there as often as possible. Every time we decided to go, we would all meet up at the trailhead and hike to the site together. This time would be the exception. There were scheduling conflicts, and if we wanted to go at all, it wouldn't be at the same time. Ashley and Emma could barely get away for the weekend. They would have to catch up to us later at the campsite. At the last minute, even Maya called and said she was running behind and might not make it until later. In retrospect, I should have seen it coming, seeing what the date we had set for our trip. But instead of canceling and choosing another time, I just shrugged it off as conflicting schedules and hefted my backpack, then started down the trail. Being by myself on this trail never really bothered me before. I'd hiked this trail many times and never had a problem. I decided to go early and get the camp set up so we could have maximum time together. My schedule had been cleared for the entire trip, and I was going to take full advantage. The sun had set until I started down the trail, and it would be dark by the time I got to our campsite. Hiking at night wasn't the best thing to do, even though I knew the trail, but aside from getting camp set up, I was also excited to use my new book light. It worked surprisingly well, lighting up the trail, and made it much easier to use my walking stick for the most difficult parts of the trail. Taking it slow, going at my own pace, and enjoying as much scenery as I could was a luxury I was enjoying. Usually, Ashley would lead the group and drive us hard until we got to camp. I wanted to get out my book and read as I walked, but I figured that would be tempting fate, and I had no desire to face plant on the trail after discovering a tree root the hard way. As I walked, lost in thought, suddenly the forest became eerily silent. The birds stopped singing, squirrels stopped chattering, even crickets stopped chirping. It was so quiet I could hear my own footsteps. It was very unsettling. I stopped and slowly turned around, using my light to search for anything unusual. After a full circle without seeing anything out of the ordinary, I tried to shake off the feeling and just keep going. It didn't take long for me to begin speeding up. Every step was somehow more desperate than the last, as if getting to my campsite would somehow protect me from whatever was out there, making the animals and creatures of the night afraid to make a sound. By the time I could see the clearing where we camped rising in the distance, I was power walking, nearly running. All of a sudden, the noises started back up again, as if someone had flipped a switch, or I had somehow stepped out of some invisible danger zone. I paused and turned back to see if there was any physical sign of what had happened, if there was some creature lurking behind me or something. But there was nothing. And nothing seemed to be even more unnerving. It wasn't until later, after everything was over, that I realized how stupid it was for me to travel this trail by myself, let alone in the dark. I guess it was a combination of things that made me do it. First of all, just the disappointment of everyone nearly canceling at the last minute. Secondly was my surprise package that came on time, and just wanting to use this cool new light in any way I could. But the really big thing that did it for me was my stubbornness. I had decided I was going camping, come hell or high water. I didn't realize it would be the former. It didn't even register that I was heading out alone on the trail at night on October 30th, the day before Halloween. It didn't take me long to get my tent set up, and I didn't bother with the fire. I just dove straight inside and zipped up the entrance, somehow believing that the thin layer of tent material would keep me safe from anything that went bump in the night. I lay there on the bare tent floor, breathing hard in sheer terror, wondering why I was so frightened. There hadn't been any tangible proof of anything following me. I had seen nothing. What had got me so worked up? This is what I told myself over and over, until my breathing slowed back to normal. As I unpacked my backpack to settle in, once I was secure in my sleeping bag, I finally dug out the book I brought along for the trip. It was a domestic thriller called Secrets, about a woman whose life was turned upside down. I turned on my light and began reading. It didn't take me long to become so engrossed in the story that the world around me disappeared. That was when the adrenaline crash from the fear grabbed my face and said, "You're going to sleep now." Sometime later, I woke and pulled my face out of the small puddle of drool that had soaked into my sleeping bag. I sat up, wiped my mouth, and stretched. To my great surprise, the book light was still on, and I hadn't broken it by laying on it. The darkness outside had given way to a dull gray. It must have been just before sunrise. Pulling myself out of the sleeping bag gave me an instant reminder of how cold autumn mornings can be in the forest. While pulling on my jacket, I froze. There was something or someone moving around just outside my tent. Zipping up my jacket quietly, I slid towards the zipper tent window in hopes of getting a closer look. My hands shook as I pulled the tab slowly, hoping to make as little noise as possible, then sneak a peek at whatever was out there. My eyes slid up to the opening and peered out. All I could see through the slit was dim outlines of trees through the growing morning light. I scanned around as much as I could through my limited view, when suddenly a pair of glowing eyes appeared in the window. I screamed and threw myself backward onto my sleeping bag, landing with a thump that took my breath away. The shadow of the creature moved from the window to the main tent flap. I lay there helpless as the zipper undid itself, and the hideous face of the monster poked itself inside. It roared so loud I clamped my hands over my ears. My life flashed before my eyes as it slowly entered the tent, growling and snarling. Regret filled me. Why didn't I wait for my friends? But then they would die with me. Maybe it was better they were late. They would find my horribly mutilated and possibly eaten body. But they might survive if they ran away. As these thoughts chased each other around my brain, I noticed something. The creature was wearing a sparkly bracelet. Not only that, but it seemed to have a manicure. Now that I looked more closely, it was wearing a t-shirt and sweatpants. I reached up and grabbed the creature's face, then ripped it off with all my might. Ouch, it said as the fur came loose. In a heartbeat, I was holding the creature's face in my hand, and Maya stood there rubbing her eyes. "You think you could yank my ears off the next time?" she said. "Sure, after I'm done having a heart attack, you jerk," I said. She smiled, still rubbing her eyes. "Happy Halloween," she said. "Screw you," I said, throwing the mask at her and storming out of the tent. "Wait, you're not really mad, are you?" I heard her say from behind me as I trudged down the trail. I didn't bother to turn around or even slow down. "Where are you going?" she asked. The thought registered in my head, but I couldn't seem to answer the question. Where was I going? I was just stomping down the trail with no destination in mind. The sun was peeking over the horizon as I passed a clearing in the trees. Without thinking, I slowed to a stop and stood there admiring the simple, elegant beauty of the sunrise. I heard and felt a presence beside me as I stared into the rising sun. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Maya said. I turned to her and smiled. "I should throw you off this cliff," I said. She took a step back, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "Sucks being afraid, doesn't it?" I said. "Yeah," she said, staying a healthy distance away from me. "I guess it does. You know what you should do with that mask?" "I'm sure you have a few creative suggestions," she said carefully. I turned to her with a gleam in my eyes. "You should scare the hell out of Ashley and Emma." Her look slowly transformed from fear to confusion, as the edge of her lips slid up into a grin. It was late afternoon when Ashley and Emma came huffing and puffing up the hill to the campsite. I'd started a campfire and made some lunch. There was also some coffee brewing on the fire. "Well, you two sure took your time," I said, poking at the fire and adding another piece of wood. "You're lucky we came at all," Ashley said. "I was going to call and cancel like Maya did." I said, trying my best to sound upset and disappointed. "Are you kidding me?" Emma said, dropping her backpack. "After we busted our butts to get up here." "Afraid so," I said. "That's great," Ashley said, pulling her cell phone out of her pocket. "You wait until I talk to her." I wasn't sure if Maya had silenced her phone or not. Ashley's call could ruin the whole prank. My mind searched frantically for something to do. "Don't bother," I said. "I already tried calling her this morning. It went straight to voicemail." Ashley said, putting her phone back in her pocket. "She's probably snuggled up in bed sleeping." "Well, at least you two made it," I said, pointing to the logs around the fire. "Take a load off." They looked at the logs with disdain, but shrugged and sat. "I guess exhaustion will lower your standards regarding where you rest." We chit-chatted for a while, mostly about how upset we were with Maya for skipping out on us. Then I helped them set up their tents. We had just finished when, off in the distance, we heard a roar and a scream. "What was that?" Ashley said, looking around, trying to determine what direction it had come from. "I don't know," I said, putting on an Oscar-level performance of looking frightened while trying not to smile. Maya had outdone herself. She said she would look around for roaring sounds on her phone, but that was so loud. I didn't know her phone could get that loud. Light was just beginning to fade, making it even harder to see if there was anything coming out of the trees towards us. Emma was having a full panic attack. "What do we do? What do we do?" she asked. "Let's just go in our tents and hope whatever it is doesn't care about finding us," I replied. "We should leave," Emma said, her eyes starting to dart all around, searching for danger. "I think so too," Ashley said. "If there's something out there, it could come after us." I tried to do a quick pivot to save the prank. "Where would we go?" I said. "Our cars are miles away. If that thing was after us, it would stalk us on the trail too, and we wouldn't have our tents made up to hide in." They looked at me with what looked like suspicion that turned into resignation. "I guess you're right," Ashley said. "We should just go in our tents and hope that thing goes away." "Are you kidding me?" Emma said. "Why not just wrap ourselves in our sleeping bags and serve ourselves up as burritos for that thing?" "Don't you think you're overreacting?" I said. "We don't even know what that was. Maybe it was some animal calling for a mate." "And what about the scream?" "It could have been someone that saw it and was scared," I said. Ashley watched our back and forth conversation. "Let's just go to our tents," she said. "No," Emma said. "I want to leave right now." "There's the trail," I said, pointing. "No one's stopping you." She looked from the trail to Ashley to me. I turned and went into my tent. A few minutes later, I heard another tent flap rustle, followed by a third. A smile crept across my face. This was going to be fun. I was so excited I barely read any of my book. Within an hour, I heard something outside the tent, rustling through the campsite and knocking things over. "Here we go," I whispered. It was all I could do to stay in my tent when I heard Emma scream. There was no way I could watch Maya chasing them around with that ridiculous mask on and not howl with laughter. I wanted to give the prank time for them to be scared before revealing our devious plan. Fits of laughter fought to escape me, but I held them in as I heard Ashley's screams join the fray. From the sound, they were all running around, destroying the campsite. Between the growls, running, knocking into things, and screams of terror, the whole cacophony of it was nearly impossible to sit through. Every inch of me was aching to jump out and yell, "Happy Halloween, we got you." After a few minutes, the noise died down. Everyone must have gotten tired. I was still waiting for the aha moment when I heard Ashley or Emma curse at Maya. The mask wasn't that convincing once you calmed down and got a bit of a closer look at it. Any minute now. I leaned close to the wall of my tent, but all movement had stopped. It was like everyone had just laid down and took a nap. I couldn't take it any longer. I ripped open my tent and jumped out, yelling, "Surprise! Happy Halloween." The rest of the words died on my tongue. The campsite wasn't in disarray. It was destroyed. Both Ashley and Emma's tents were flattened. As I stepped closer, I saw rips and gouges in their tents as well. As I looked around the campsite at the carnage, my first thought was, wow, Maya really overdid it. But that thought didn't hold for long. The more I moved through the camp, the more I saw claw marks and huge footprints, something that Maya couldn't do. All doubts ended when I came across Ashley. She lay in a pool of blood, and at first I thought it was a trick, that they had turned Maya back against me, and now I was being pranked. However, that thought died a quick death when I saw Ashley's severed arm laying a few feet from her. Her eyes were wide open in shock. She looked at me with a blank stare of accusation and tried to whisper something, but I couldn't hear it. I leaned closer, and she whispered again. Her final words, haunting me, shouldn't have come. This couldn't be Maya. It wasn't a trick or a prank. Something real had just invaded our camp and destroyed my friend. Fear gripped me as I looked around to see if this creature was lying in wait to kill me too. As I searched the rest of the camp, hoping moment by moment that this thing was gone, I also didn't find Emma. Eventually, I found a large pool of blood not far from her tent, but nobody was around. The trail of blood led from the pool off towards the woods, and I had no desire to follow it. The next thought that came to my panicked mind was, if this wasn't Maya, then where was she? She purposely didn't tell me where she was hiding, so I wouldn't unintentionally give away her position by glancing at a certain spot. It was a smart plan until she went missing, and I had no idea what was going on. My next thought was calling for help, but when I got out my phone, I found it was also dead, even though I didn't want to. I went over to Ashley's now dead body and searched for her cell phone, but I found it in pieces. There would be no call for help. Despondency smothered me and pulled me to the ground. I sat in the middle of the campsite beside a pool of blood that used to be one of my friends, only a handful of feet away from the broken body that used to be another one of my friends, having no idea where my third friend was. I'd never been in such a desperate place in my life, not only physically, but mentally, and I hoped I would never be in such a place again. I had no idea what to do or where to go. The realization began to set in that I had lost 3 of my closest friends in the space of a day. Tears flowed down my cheeks as I sat there in the glowing darkness, with only the embers of the dying light to keep me company. Should I sit here and hope that help would stumble by in the form of another hiker, or even better, a park ranger? It was late October, and the trails weren't very well traveled once the weather turned cold. As I sat there, a gust of wind blew through, tearing at the few remaining leaves clinging to their branches. They began to fall as if the forest was crying with me, or for me. I wished I knew what the forest knew about this thing that had destroyed my friends and my life, about how I would get out of here alive, and most of all, about what had happened to Maya. As much as I wanted to just sit there and mourn forever, I knew I couldn't. I knew I had to get up and go figure this out. How would I get out of here? How would I survive? Maybe my tent held the key. By some miracle, my tent was undamaged. I started digging through my backpack. There are always things in everyone's backpack that they have for emergencies that never happen. Usually it's a snake bite kit, a length of rope, or band-aids that seldom, if ever, get used. But as I was digging, I came across some things that might be useful. There was a can of pepper spray and a small pocket knife. At this point, I was happy to have anything I could use as a weapon. They went in my pocket, along with the rope. So now it was decision time. Do I pack up my stuff right now and leave, hiking down the trail in the dark, having no idea if this thing is still on the hunt? Or do I lay down and get some rest, wait for morning, and hope it doesn't know I'm here? Neither one was a great option. There was no way I could even consider burying Ashley. I didn't have a shovel, and I would need all my energy to hike back out of here if I hoped to survive. Thankfully, the decision was made for me. As I laid there, mind whirling from everything that had happened, I fell asleep. I woke hours later to a bright morning sun peeking through my open tent window. I yawned and stretched, thinking about what a beautiful morning it could be, when suddenly I remembered everything that had happened. That's when I heard the growling. It was just loud enough to get my attention. Fear gripped me as I tried to figure out what to do. My brain went into full useless mode as run out of the tent screaming rose to the top of possible options. The growling didn't seem to get any closer as I lay there, awaiting my fate. Encouraged by the fact that I hadn't become the monster's breakfast yet, I got up to my knees and quietly looked out the window. What I saw disgusted and enraged me. There were 2 mountain lions having their breakfast. Normally, I wouldn't care about such a thing, more than staying as far away as possible, but today their breakfast was my friend's dead body. I did exactly what was at the top of my brain's list. Ran out of the tent screaming. At first, I ran straight at them, hoping it would scare them off. They both just stopped and stared at me as if I were some rude interloper interrupting them having morning tea. The next thing they did was turn and take a few steps towards me. As I stared at their blood-soaked faces, I realized I'd done the worst thing possible. I lowered my hands and started backing away, trying to look as non-threatening as possible. This seemed to encourage them to increase their pursuit. I was almost back to my tent, but it didn't seem like diving inside and hiding was an option now. They were aware of me and very interested in me, possibly as lunch. As my list of potential actions dwindled to wait for death, my hand brushed against my leg, and I felt something in my pocket. It was the pepper spray. I pulled it out, having no idea if it even worked on cats, and aimed it at them. They didn't slow in the slightest. It looked like a stream of water sprayed out of the can and landed on the first cat's face. Its reaction was immediate. It let out a massive yell and began clawing at its face. The second paused in confusion, watching its companion devolve into convulsions of pain. When it looked back at me, I had already sprayed its face, causing the same reaction. For a long moment, I was treated to the insanely comical sight of these 2 predators twirling in circles, trying to claw their own faces off. And then, the impossible happened. They both decided breakfast wasn't worth the cost of admission and ran off. I looked down at this small, innocuous-looking spray can that had just saved my life. It was tempting to give it a kiss in celebration, but I didn't want to take any chance of getting any spray on me. Writhing in pain wasn't high on my list of things to do today. Having just escaped death, I decided on my plan of action. My backpack was packed in under a half hour, and I was on the trail, having said my goodbyes to Ashley and what was left of Emma. A sharp pang of guilt stabbed me as I left the campsite. Ashley's last whispered words haunted me. Shouldn't have come. She was right, of course. If any of us had known what was about to happen, there was no way we should have been here. But that's the whole point of life, I guess. None of us know what's going to happen at any minute. As if I wasn't depressed enough as it was, that thought sent me into near panic as my eyes darted all around, searching for danger. Now it wasn't only the monster, but the mountain lions and any other creature whose home I had invaded. Right then, I knew I would never visit this place again. Even the woodland creatures were quiet, out of respect for my fallen friends. Wait, how would they know? As if in answer, the monster stepped out onto the trail and stared down at me. It was massive. I'd never seen anything that tall. Not only was it tall, but its shoulders were a good 6 feet wide. It was covered in dark fur that had splotches of wet, dark stains down the front of it. My mind told me that was all that was left of Emma. It unleashed a deafening roar that made a small river flow down my pant leg. My mind was like a little dog chasing its tail, trying to figure out what to do as I stood there, frozen to the spot. I took 2 steps, and it was right in front of me. When it reached for me, some basic survival mode kicked in, and I went to the last thing that had saved my life. I whipped out the pepper spray and emptied the can in the monster's face. It reared back and screamed so loud I had to hold my ears as I ran around it and sprinted down the trail. My heart was pumping adrenaline. My feet barely touched the ground. I'd never run so fast in my entire life. The trees were a blur as I wound back and forth along the trail. All I could think was just get away, just get away. As hope soared that I might be able to do just that, I heard a noise coming from behind me. It was like a bulldozer with legs. I heard pounding and crashing as if something was destroying whatever got in its way. I glanced back, and the monster was gaining on me, but it was flailing its arms around in front of it as if to protect its eyes from whatever was there. That momentary distraction was just enough. My foot caught on a branch I wasn't looking for, and I went tumbling at full speed off the trail and into the brush. I hit a tree hard with my back. I was sure I heard a crack. It was all I could do to just stay conscious. I watched through blurry eyes as the monster ran past me on the trail. There was no way I could celebrate or even move. Running so fast for so long had taken its toll, and now having fallen and possibly injuring my back had just added to my immobility. It took me a few long moments to catch my breath. Once I did, I slowly moved body parts to make sure they still worked. I saved the worst for last. Trying to sit up caused pain to shoot down my back. That wasn't a good sign. It seemed like I would be here for a little bit, at least until I recovered enough to make another try for my car. I knew it was less than a mile away, but right now I couldn't even think about getting up to walk, let alone run. I painfully pulled my backpack off and sat it beside me. Next, I tried to cover myself and my pack with the loose leaves that blanketed the ground. Within 15 minutes, I was satisfied that no one would be able to see me from the trail without looking very closely. There was a peephole I'd left open to keep an eye on the trail. The monster would be back eventually. There was no doubt about that. Once it realized I wasn't on the trail anymore, it would backtrack looking for me. Spraying it may have saved my life, but it also doomed me to be its enemy forever. It would search high and low to find me. I was as sure about that as anything. Even though it was mid-morning, the trees here were dense, and light had to filter through a lot of them to make it to the ground. Reaching into my pack, I pulled out my reading light, which was surprisingly still in one piece. I used it to check my wounds, and found they were mostly cuts and scrapes. As my adrenaline crashed, I could feel myself being once again dragged into unconsciousness. My eyes drooped, then suddenly shot open as I heard something. The part of the trail I could see through my peephole was quite small. I leaned to the left a bit, trying to not make any sound. That's when I heard sniffing and saw the monster coming slowly back up the trail. It was on all fours, smelling the ground. One eye looked like it was swollen shut, and the other was bloodshot. It got to the point in the trail where I had fallen. It stopped, then turned and looked right at me. My blood turned to liquid nitrogen. The monster stalked straight towards me as if it could see me plain as day. I glanced down and realized to my horror that my reading light was still on. I panicked. If I turned it off, the monster would know I was there. If I left it on, it was a beacon leading it right to me. I gently pulled it from around my neck, trying to move as little as possible. Once I had it off me, I set it on top of my backpack so it was at the same level as it had been around my neck. I slid it away from the pack. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the knife, then opened it. The monster was so close I could smell the stench of death coming from its mouth. It got right up to the light and brushed the leaves away to see what this thing was. There was only one shot for me to survive. I swung the knife with all the strength I had left, stabbing it in the eye that wasn't swollen. It reared back and screamed in pain. I didn't wait around to see what was going to happen. Every ounce of energy I had went to running away from this homicidal monster. My back screamed at me, but I ignored it. The creature screamed again, this time in rage rather than pain. It tore off after me but couldn't see me, so it ended up slamming into a tree 4 feet behind me. My legs kept pumping, driven by the sheer terror. As I glanced back, I saw the monster listening to me run away. It followed my sounds and ran after me again. I pivoted and ran up the side of the trail just in time for it to miss me and fall face first on the trail. It wasn't far to the trailhead now. I knew it was getting close. There was a hard turn in the trail where I had to be careful of my footing. It was narrow, and there was a steep drop that ended in a river far below. I ran to where the turn was and suddenly stopped. The monster had gotten up and was listening for me again. It was a gamble, but I stood at the turn and jumped in place as though I was still running away. It listened, then launched itself toward me. As soon as it began to run, I quietly stepped around the corner and softly walked down the trail a few feet. If my gamble paid off, I would be home free. If it didn't, I'd be dead. Time slowed as the beast galloped towards the turn. I watched and waited until finally I saw the bloody fur of its face with a knife still sticking out. At that last moment, it seemed to sense me around the corner and tried to turn, but momentum had already carried it past me, and it had no chance of staying on the trail. I leaned over and watched as it fell helplessly over the edge and tumbled down to the water below, hitting its head on several trees as it went. It had just come to rest at the bottom when I took off running. The trailhead loomed in front of me, and I didn't want to take any chances of that thing recovering and catching me before I got to my car. I'd never seen a more beautiful sight than my beat-up Toyota Corolla. When I approached it, I paused yet again and looked around for who or what might be watching me. Hanging from my driver's side mirror was the mask Maya had worn. I took it off the mirror and looked at it in shock and confusion. Inside was a note. There was a crash from the woods that told me the monster hadn't given up. I jumped in the car, threw the mask on the passenger seat, and broke every speeding law getting out of the park. Even once I was on the main road, I pushed the pedal down to make the car go as fast as it could. My speedometer needle was vibrating when I hit 80. It wasn't until I was close to home that I slowed down. I got out and went into my tiny house, bringing the mask. I collapsed on the couch as my back complained. I would have to schedule an appointment with my chiropractor. Once I was safely inside, I picked up the mask and pulled out the note. It read, "I'm sorry to leave without telling you." The girls were coming up the trail, and I was about to jump out at them when I saw this monster following them through the woods. I couldn't warn them or you without the monster seeing. When they set up their tents, it was watching from the edge of the woods. I panicked and quietly left while it was busy watching the camp. I hope you're alive to read this, and if so, you can someday forgive me. Signed, Maya. I lay the note beside me on the couch, and all I could think of as tears streamed down my cheeks were Ashley's final words to me. Shouldn't have come. I'm a 15-year-old male, and my friend group, all around the same age, all love one thing: sailing. So when there was a boat race event on a lake in Oregon where we all come from, we decided to participate. Since the race was hosted on a lake, there was a lot of green space and camps nearby. My friend suggested we spend the nights there camping. We brought our tents and sleeping mats, and we found the perfect spot. It was kind of isolated, but it had a beautiful view of the lake. One small issue, though. The camp was more like an open space in a little forest. So we were surrounded by trees, with the only way to get in and out being a narrow dirt road. We parked the RV there, and us teens prepared to sleep outside. All the adults slept in the RV. We had a ton of fun, joking, starting a fire, all the things you do on a camping trip. When it was time to sleep, we all got into our tents and drifted off into sleep. Well, I hope so for my friends, but that wasn't the case for me. I just couldn't sleep, probably due to the uncountable number of sodas I downed just a few hours prior. As I stared at the roof of the tent, I started to have the feeling that we weren't alone there, that there was something, or even worse, someone there with us. I didn't think much of it and tried to sleep until I heard the loud sound of a tree branch breaking. I wasn't the only one to hear it. My friend who was in the tent with me suddenly woke up and whispered, "What was that?" I told him that it was probably an animal wandering around and accidentally broke a tree branch on the ground, as it probably would often occur in forests like that. As I kept explaining, my friend signaled to me to be quiet and to listen. There were footsteps. That's what ran through my mind as soon as I heard leaves and branches moving on the ground. What happened next, though, is scary. Everyone was suddenly woken up by the RV's anti-theft alarm going off. We all peeked out of our tents, just to see a silhouette of a man running away in the woods. We found a crowbar near the RV's front right door. Thankfully, the alarm went off and scared the thief, because if it didn't happen, most likely all of our belongings that were inside the RV would have been stolen. Thank you for spending this time with Brad Arrows. We hope the stories whispered through the rain carried you far into your imagination or your dreams. If you're still awake, let us know how you liked the journey. Until next time, stay safe, sleep well, and let the darkness comfort you.